Chapter 481, Episode 91, One Single Fable 5. Those were Uriel's last words to us. She didn't say anything else afterwards. And while not saying anything, the outer god kings exchanged glances with each other. I didn't miss that opening and spoke up. We don't have any intentions to fight against you, just like how you don't truly wish to destroy this world. You are just as familiar with tragedies as I am. There is no need to create more sorrow in this world line. The scenario has entered a temporary state of lull. Starstream is surprised by the unexpected development of this scenario. I grew tense while observing their response. The outer gods still didn't say anything. I couldn't even tell whether they heard my words or not. So far, things had unfolded according to Kim Dakya's plan. Using the 999th turn's memories, and arousing their memories of Yu Yonghyuk. From the beginning, it was impossible to win this fight with a frontal assault. If they got serious and activated the calamity's probability with everything they had, then this scenario would have ended just as it started. Back in the original novel, there were a few planets that responded naively to their great apocalypse and ended up getting destroyed instead. A large number of constellations that dislike you are dissatisfied with the current situation. A portion of constellations are opposing against the scenario's illogical development. The constellations were probably anticipating a spectacle of their hated Kim Dakya company, meeting a tragic end alongside Earth. Unfortunately, the outer god kings didn't do that. At least not for now anyway. Kim Dakya, what's next? Han Suyong sidled up to my right and asked in a tense voice. To be honest, even I don't know. Why? This is as far as my plan goes. As if to imply her thoughts of, what crap are you talking about? Her face was dyed in the colors of pure astonishment. Hey you can't be. Right now, we can only believe. That must have come across as irresponsible. However, there was no other choice. This was the best plan I could come up with, and it also happened to be the only way to lead this event towards the correct conclusion. I abruptly recalled what the 1863rd turn's Han Suyong had told me. I believe in the characters I've created, that's all. I could just about understand where she was coming from now, and that's why I replied like this. I thought that I can only believe in these people who were like teachers to me, these individuals that I had read about. I trusted the ways of survival, not the author responsible, no, but the characters that appeared within its pages. The living flame is looking at you. Uriel, more righteous than anyone else out there. The king of Silverlight Heart is looking at you. The kind and honest Yehyun-seong. The master of the sunken island is looking at you. Yijai possessing a lot of affection. Constellation, secretive plotter, is looking at you. Yu Yonghyuk, who never knelt down in defeat no matter how unfair things became. I believed in them. I believed in their histories that helped the young me grow. I believed that their worth would never be tarnished, no matter how much time had passed by. The 999th turn Uriel opened her mouth, although she wasn't talking to me. Yehyun-seong, you said that we might get to see the end in this world line, the one we failed to see before. That's correct, Uriel. And your opinion hasn't changed even now. Yehyun-seong nodded. Uriel then slowly turned her head towards me. Her irises were burning brightly just like the corona of the sun. Did you say you're the demon king of salvation? Against that gaze seemingly testing my righteousness, I subconsciously swallowed back my saliva and nodded my head. Through this world line's version of myself, I have seen the fables related to you. It was then Jiang Huiwan standing nearby flinched a little. Technically, though, it wasn't her but probably Uriel instead. I was getting a somewhat ominous vibe here. What the living flame said next was completely out of my expectations, though. Your fables were quite similar to those of Yu Yonghyuk's that I'm familiar with, from the way you cleared the scenarios to how you looked after your companions. This world line resembles ours quite closely. The expression on the 999th turns Yijai was rather complicated. I realized why they stood around looking at each other for such a long time the moment I saw her face. They weren't agitated simply because this world just so happened to be their home planet. Are you aware of the events that took place in our world line? I hesitated on what to say. This wasn't something that I could explain away easily. Instead of my lacking communication skills, though, my fables began speaking up in my stead. Fable, Demon King of Salvation, has begun its storytelling. A portion of the fables I possessed traveled towards the beings from the 999th turn via the tip of my hand. Fable, One Who Opposes the Miracle, has begun its storytelling. Fable, One Who Hunted the King of Disasters, has begun its storytelling. I observed them reading my fables. Diverse, colorful expressions filled their faces. It was quite clear what overlapped with my fable while they were reading it. Did I also make such an expression while reading The Ways of Survival for the first time? That was something I'd never find out. But how could such a thing? It was around then that an unexpected event occurred. The status of the 999th turns Uriel, reading my fable silently until then, traveled over the fable itself and invaded into the sea of my consciousness. As if she wanted to find out the origin of my existence. Exclusive skill, the fourth wall is activating. Tsujujujut. Just as I expected, the wall made a move as the blinding sparks danced in the air. The fourth wall is glaring at the living flame. The living flame's left hand was deflected away as if being rejected, a faint trace of burn marks visible on her skin. She looked at me in pure shock, then the faint hints of understanding began permeating in the lights of her eyes. I see, so that's how it was. You are. Her voice sounded even more surprised compared to when she was reading my memories. The last fragment of the final wall, is that why the secretive plotter was so obsessed over you? Please make your decision. There isn't much time left until the scenario's end. The Great Apocalypse scenario has entered a temporary state of lull. If the current situation persists, the distortion of the world will accelerate. Since they had descended as calamities, this scenario now had to have a conclusion without exception. The best method for everyone involved was for them to give up on being the calamities. The living flame opened her lips again. I acknowledge the potential you possess. Although vexing, I can even agree to forestall my vengeance. However, countless emotions brushed past her expression just then. However, I don't believe that you'll successfully reach the end of this world line. I don't believe that an existence that merely imitated another world line's fable can witness a proper conclusion. Hang on. You'll probably reach your conclusion when this scenario comes to an end. The last part of one single fable, the conclusion Chinese letter. A gobsmacking heat storm began condensing with the 999th turn, Uriel as its center. Salty air circulated around my nose as the seawater evaporated into the rushing winds. I reflexively cried out at this outrageous transformation of status. Yu Young-hyuk. At the same time, he stepped up before me and cut down the rushing hot air with his dark heavenly demon sword. However, the heat still managed to cook the backs of his hands. His breathing became irregular. The disconnected film theory's effect had almost run its course. Kugugugugu. The 999th turn's great fables were activating simultaneously. For some reason, even the 999th turn's Yihyeonseong didn't try to stop Uriel. I urgently shouted out, "But why? There's no need to do this, we." The 999th turn's Uriel wordlessly strode over to us. Companions grew tense and began unleashing their own statuses. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is continuing on with its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch That Swallowed the Myth, is continuing on with its storytelling. The living flame simply took a glance at our fables and continued to approach us. After every outer god handed over their status to her, she raised her flames of retribution up high. I bit down hard on my lip. The absolute majority of the constellations are scared of the outer god's power. Many Dakibus are repulsed by the fable of the outer god. Everything within Starstream would soon become stories. However, why was a story both the constellations and Dakibus didn't want to see deemed necessary? Just what was the reason for a story to exist in this world, when it was only good for plunging everyone into endless sorrow? Do you always seek to create a fable to tell someone else? The 999th Turn's Uriel was talking to us. The flames of retribution, refined to the stunning degree, was now talking about the time outside of the scenarios. Who does it exist for, this fable you have compiled so far? While listening to her true voice, I realized what her intentions were. A story nobody supported. Even then, she wished to see the end of this particular scenario. And that is the answer the living flame had chosen. The reason why she wanted to continue on with this scenario wasn't because she agreed with the constellations, nor did she want to side with Starstream. Show me your conclusion. Prove it to me that your group can reach an end different from any other world lines. Stars in the skies were looking at us. Stars that had been watching this story for a very long time. I imagined those countless starlights and then end of all the worlds waiting beyond that. I imagined the end of this story, the one I'd been building up to for a long time. Kim Dakya. The waves of heat completely filled up my view. The hellfire of the 999th Turn's Uriel, intermingling with the odor of burning sulfur, created the tsunami wave of lava. It was the moving wall of enormous status capable of immediately melting everything that it touched. The victory would be decided with one attack. Block that and we'd emerge as the victors. Focus your great fables, everyone. Petty tricks were rendered useless in the face of a calamity. My companions helped me with the mobilization of the great fables, rather than focusing on their own specialities. Shin Yuseung, Yigilyon, and even Yu Sanga, too. Everyone raised their hands up in the air and added their share of the great fables. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, has begun its storytelling. Accompanying the noises of the heavens splitting apart, the roars of the apocalypse dragon could be heard. Right next second, yet another loud howl exploded out from Han Suyong's direction. Kuowu, the former candidate for the apocalypse dragon, the abyssal black flame dragon, was firing its breath. Jiang Huiwen dashed forward, while riding on the vicious storm of the black flame. Constellation, lily blooming on Aquarius, is unleashing her status. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is unleashing her status. Two archangels were working together with Jiang Huiwen. Her judge's sword, raised up high, was now cutting down the tsunami wave. Quiet. Was it because of the two archangels' combined attack? For a moment there, the tsunami wave's movement grew sluggish. Yu Yonghyuk didn't miss that opening. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is continuing with its storytelling. Traces of numerous regression turns branched out from his dark heavenly demon sword. His status spread out and began destroying the rushing wave. It's not enough. Unfortunately, his desperate resistance couldn't last for long. The sparks dancing all over his body were getting fiercer and fiercer. The disconnected film theory effect had finally run out, in other words. The moment his status began declining sharply, he let rip one powerful attack at the center of the wave. Breaking the sky swordsmanship, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Inner mysteries, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Split the dark ocean, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. A minute opening was created by the attack from his inner mysteries. I didn't miss that. Macnia preparations are complete. Also, the voice I had been waiting for entered my ears just then, too. Surrounding clouds gathered around me as if to envelop me, somersault clouds, filled to the brim with cracking thunderbolts, completely encircled me. My body was buzzing as if every lightning found in the heavens had been hoovered up here. We can use this only once. I kicked off the clouds and dashed into the gap within the lava. My wings generated through the Demon King transformation, were lit on fire, and it felt like my eyeballs were being cooked by this horrifying heat. However, I didn't stop. I had a duty to protect this path. My comrades opened up for me. The one single story that can stand as the testament to our lives. My feet moved faster and faster until they became streaks of light. I used the powers of lightning transformation to hold together my incarnation body, threatening to explode at any second. Faster and stronger, as if I had become a single streak of lightning. The lightning charged fully in both of my hands boiled vigorously. This lightning, capable of smashing apart countless stars found in Star Stream, the one that half-destroyed Emperor, Heavenly Palace. I used up every ounce of my strength to throw the Rui Jingu Bang. Stars in the skies boiled over, and nebulas shrunk back. The thick dark clouds rolling in the heavens alluded to their despair. This single attack carried all the condensed power of the great sage Heaven's equal. Just like what he did during the final battle. The lightning bolt broke past the incoming lava and advanced forward. Quack, 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 quack. The tsunami wave of lava exploded grandly and evaporated right there and then. The streaks of electricity branching out created a path above the splitting wave. It was the path of the fable we had been walking on, and I ran on it. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is arranging your conclusion. The Demon World, beginning/Gi Chinese letter. Great Fable, Torch that swallowed the myth, is proudly guiding you. Olympus, development/Seung Chinese letter. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is right by your side. The Great War of Saints and Demons, climax/Jian Chinese letter, and then. Great Fable, Liberator of the Forgotten Ones, is dreaming of the final fable. The last dot that hadn't been filled yet. Qualia. All the fables we experienced together merged into one and emitted blinding rays of light. The explosion of light so bright that it seared my eyes, blanketed everything. When I raised my head again, the volcanic ashes from the lava were scattering away in the air. The sky looked desolate after everything had come to an end. The dust blocking the gazes of the stars fell like snow and covered the ocean's surface. Someone was plopped down on her butt in front of the unbreakable faith. I could see the broken wings of an archangel. From the beginning, she wasn't planning to win against us. I quietly stared into her eyes. I didn't know whether this was enough proof or not. Just that, this was the best I could show as the current me. The 999th turn. Uriel stared at my blade for a long time. It was as if she was repeatedly mulling over the last line of text, as if this pointy tip of the blade was the full stop putting an end to all of her fables. Then her gaze slowly shifted along towards where that tip of the blade was now pointing at. It was beyond the horizon, where the distant sky and the ocean met. That's where the end of this world line was. A faint trembling flickered past her expressions. The 999th turns Yijai Hai, Yihyeonseong, and even the still-dazed Kim Nam-woon were all staring in the same direction as her. Beyond the falling gray ashes, something blurry could be seen. Fear began clouding the expressions of the outer gods. I instantly realized what they were staring at the place where they arrived once before during the 999th turn, at the final wall that could never be overcome if one insisted on living within this world of fables. Calamities of the Great Apocalypse scenario are giving up on the positions of calamity. The Great Apocalypse is entering the termination sequence. Your last great fable is blossoming. Absolute majority of the constellations are witnessing the moment of your last fable's awakening. I could now hear that wall calling out to me. Hidden scenario, one single fable has reached the conclusion. Starstream is carefully considering the name of your last fable. You accomplished a feat that every star in Starstream will revere you for. You have arrived at an epic that only an extremely few stars have ever reached. And finally, the message I had been waiting for the longest time could be heard next. You and your nebula have earned the qualification to witness the black square of everything. The King of Stories is summoning you. Episode 91, One Single Fable 5 Fin. Chapter 482, Final Scenario 1. 2 days after the Great Apocalypse scenario's conclusion. During these 2 days, the 98th scenario meandering nowhere fast also ended, as well. 98th scenario, candidate selection has automatically ended. No one has challenged your nebula. Number of victories, 1. Contents of your reward is currently being finalized. Clearing of the Great Apocalypse scenario has been linked to your reward, and the contents are still being discussed. Perhaps that was inevitable. While nebulas were busy fighting each other, we actually were victorious in the Great Apocalypse scenario. We fought off the ancient outer gods and protected Earth. Not only that, with only the strength of our nebula alone, too. A large number of constellations respect you and your nebula. Nebula Kim Dakya Company fame is spreading far and wide in Starstream. Every constellation in the final scenario is now aware of your nebula. Every constellation in the final scenario is curious of your conclusion. And now everyone in the Starstream knew of us. Representative Nim, Representative Kim Dakya, please say something. Voices from the megaphones came from outside the industrial complex. Whether it was the hologram panel or the regular TV, didn't matter where or what, our story dominated them all. Every broadcasting station, including terrestrial and cable, was showing the front yard of the industrial complex in real time. Also, the interview footages of the complex's residents were being repeated ad nauseum, too. Judge of Apocalypse Nim, can you tell us the future plans of Kim Dakya Company? Call me by my name when in public, please. Han Soo-young likes that stuff. I don't. Hey Jiang Hui-won, wanna die? I couldn't remember just how many times I had heard that wanna die by now. The true influence behind the Kim Dakya Company, Han Soo-young, the Black Flame Demon Empress. It is now revealed that, before the apocalypse, she was a famous author. Reading the ticker proclaiming genius author's insight demolishes the final scenario. I could seriously reappreciate the fact that I had indeed reached this far. Heard that your representative Nim has become a myth-grade constellation after defeating the midday sun. Does that mean our South Korea now has a myth-grade constellation that can step up to the limelight? Incarnations are currently locked in a fierce debate after witnessing the footages of the battle's final moments. Just what are the true identities of the outer gods? Why did Representative Kim Dakya-nim suddenly become a blonde? The battles we fought were broadcast not only on Starstream, but throughout Earth as well, from Yu Jung-hyuk kicking Roz, but all the way to us fighting against the lava wave created by the 999th turn's outer gods. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is quite proud of herself. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, is turning its nose up. Constellation, Most Ancient Liberators, lips are twitching. And every one of those scenes was accompanied by an interview with someone. You see me. I recognized that friend's greatness even back when we were working in the same company. NG. Just which new employee tries to be the first to go home as soon as time up. Department head Han Myung-oh. I definitely told him not to do any interviews, though. He was smiling brightly, his left hand holding onto his daughter's. It seemed that he had managed to safely rescue his child. He was just a regular friend. Well, you know those types of kids. There's always someone like that in a class, that type of a person. Now that some time had passed by, even a person claiming to be my schoolmate popped up. I began thinking that maybe some managed to survive until now. Those faces that I couldn't even place a name on. Kind Quiet likes to read a book by himself. Although not technically wrong, that explanation wasn't right either. Some words were quite convenient to use, and those words usually couldn't explain anything because of that convenience. The schoolmate muttered on about the obvious stuff for a while, before excusing himself with a stutter as if he found the camera a bit too much. He probably ran out of things to say. About Earth's Savior, the Demon King of Salvation. Another program started after that with a piece of rather sad-sounding music. It was a specially compiled documentary. Constellation, Goryeo's first sword, is nodding his head. Constellation, maritime war god, is proud of you. While watching the footages, I began recalling the time before the apocalypse, the dreams I had, the things I thought were important, etc. The fact that all these things came across as distant memories felt very alien to me. Of course, not everything was totally alien, though. He endured a painful youth stained by domestic violence, and someone suddenly switched the TV off. Dakyaya. My mother was standing by the entrance of the reception room. I smiled nonchalantly while staring at her. You're here. She nodded as a bout of silence filled the room. I stared at the TV within this silence. The darkened screen reflected both my mother and myself. A faint aroma of perfume wafted past my nose, making me feel rather strange in the process. Once upon a time, she was the one person I just couldn't understand. But now, I didn't even need to resort to omniscient reader's viewpoint to figure out what she was thinking about. I'm fine, Mother, please don't worry. A soft sigh could be heard next. I'm sorry, son. But you haven't done anything. This time there's been a lot of interview requests, hasn't it? They have been declined. There's no need for you to personally step up. You saving this world or destroying it, it matters not to them. The voices from the megaphones were still coming from afar. I knew very well what my mother was worried about and what she was apologizing for. I'm not the Kim Dokya from back then. I pulled the curtains back on the window, and the cameras pointing at the plaza all shifted towards in my direction. In the past, I was scared of the cameras, scared of someone looking at me, and terrified of strangers yapping about me in strange languages. I'll do an interview. Are you sure about this, son? How about giving it another thought? They also have the right to know, you see. I switched the TV on again. I saw the news headline pop up on the upper part of the screen. What is Kim Dokya Company's goal? Industrial complex hasn't revealed the final scenario's contents yet. A portion of nebulas are focusing on your next course of action. Starstream wishes to tell the story of your conclusion. Great Docubus are summoning you to the final scenario location. A portion of nebulas wish to form an alliance with your. At 8 o'clock tonight, please contact both the Docubus as well as the constellations. Been a while, but I found and read the first version of the Ways of Survival, the pure, unsullied version, before the author decided to alter it. Currently, both you and your nebula have acquired the qualification of the final scenario. You can enter the final scenario location at any time. The final scenario from the Ways of Survival was actually a great war against the outer gods. Yu Yonghyok from the original cut, the outer god kings, head off during that scenario and completed his own conclusion that way. In a certain way, it was rather similar to the Great Apocalypse scenario we had experienced already. Actually, if we were unsuccessful in our quest to stop the Great Apocalypse, then it'd probably go on to become the prelude to the final scenario instead. The outer gods that were supposed to become the final scenario's calamities have been sealed away. I looked at the 3 sealing spheres located in the middle of the factory. That's where the kings that descended to this world was currently asleep. The living flame, the master of the sunken island, and even the monarch of the great abyss, all 3 of them. The only one not sealed away was the king of the silver light heart, who didn't appear as a calamity. We shall watch your fable until its end. The 999th turn. Uriel said that to me during the final moments before sealing herself and her comrades within the apocalypse dragon sealing sphere. She estimated that an incredible aftermath storm would ravage them after they willingly went against the agreement with the Bureau and gave up on the positions of the calamities. You have concluded the Great Apocalypse scenario in an abnormal manner. A portion of constellations are expressing their dissatisfaction at your manner of progressing the scenario. A portion of Great Docubus hold inexplicable animosity towards you. A small number of great Dakibus acknowledge your achievement of convincing the outer gods. Currently, a number of the Wennies hold a favorable view of you. Countless messages continue to rise up in the air even now. Hidden scenario: one single fable's completion is imminent. A satisfactory great fable has been completed due to the latter half of the conclusion. Chinese letter. Starstream is recommending possible names for your final fable. Please select the great fable's name. Depending on your selection, your conclusion will be decided. I still hadn't picked a name from among the Starstream's recommendations. Kim Dakya. Han Soo-young entered while pushing open the creaking door. How are our companions feeling? About the same. Yu Yonghyok's a bit injured, but it's not so bad. The life and death pill's effects are seriously no joke, you know. She then proudly boasted that she got herself another pill, which wasn't like her, before placing that very pill on my palm. Eat it if you think you're about to croak, okay? If only you sounded nicer, I'd have been moved to tears. Han Soo-young stared at my face with unreadable light in her eyes. This soft darkness was scattering away like a screen of fog between us. A faint trace of light leaked out from the ceiling sphere, trapping the 999th turn's Uriel. Han Soo-young's face glowed warmly under that light. I guess this really is the end. I nodded my head. What was it like back in the original, the final scenario? No, never mind. Things have changed completely from the original anyway. She was right. We had already ended the war against the outer gods. That's supposed to be the original novel's final scenario. So, the final scenario we were about to face should be very different from the original. What happens when you complete the conclusion? Probably a meeting with the King of Stories. You mean the Dakibai King? Asked Han Soo-young. She pondered something for a bit, then continued on. Are you going to meet that guy? I will, not right away, but still. What do you mean? Don't make me worried here. There was the sound of knocking, and a faint wind blew across us. One of the complex's residents peeked his head through the open gap of the door Han Soo-young had left behind. Representative Nim, we have a guest, sir. A guest? It's been a while, descendant. An old-fashioned tone of voice greeted me. An unexpected existence came to visit, as it turned out. Pungbik. Heaven's wind god, Pungbik. Only then did I remember what my mother told me earlier. She said that I should meet up with Pungbik before I entered the final scenario, didn't she? Descendant, your choice was reckless. Letting the outer gods live is no different than you embracing the calamity itself. Did he show up here to spout more K-Kondi-like rubbish? Pungbik must have found my actions not to his liking, because he began a lengthy sermon at my expense, such as, the young ones looking down on scenarios nowadays, us not being serious about the scenarios, etc., etc. Excuse me. I don't have the time to waste, so I shall get right to the point. Descendant, you might find yourself in great danger once you enter the final scenario. Great danger. I say this because I've been observing your methods for a very long time. He spoke as if he knew just about everything I was planning to do in my future. Han Soo-young next to me cackled as if she was greatly amused by this. I shot her a glare and asked Pungbik. Just what is it that you came here to tell me? Hongik can lend you aid, descendant. I ended up frowning without realizing it. I now could figure out why he was here. This dude, even until the end. I don't need it. You probably will demand some kind of nonsensical payment, any. We don't need things like that. Witnessing the birth of a myth-grade constellation from the Korean peninsula is more than enough for us. I couldn't help but doubt my own hearing just then. You'll find Hongik's founding gods among the myth-grade constellations in the final scenario. If your situation turns for the worse, ask them for their aid. If you're genuine in your request, they should be compelled to make a move. Have you come here to tell me that? Pungbik expressionlessly stroked his beard and replied, correct. I'm a bit moved, actually. Pungbik lightly coughed to clear his throat. Then his body scattered away in winds. I've conveyed everything I wish to say. Let us meet again in the final scenario. Less than a blink later, only the chilly wind remained there. Han Soo-young piped up, sounding somewhat bemused. He's really coy, isn't he? How adorable. Well, he was a good constellation back in the original, so. I guess we do have some allies then. Your life wasn't in vain, man. I'd be happy if that was truly the case. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, says she's also here. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, argues that only the bad companions can be true comrades, and Constellation, most ancient liberator, is. I looked up at the sky and smirked a little. Han Soo-young spoke up. You grinning that unlucky grin again. It's almost 8, so get ready. People are waiting for you. I nodded before heading to the upper levels of the factory. I could hear the murmurs coming from the interior. All manners of media houses, docubus, and constellations were waiting for me. Before I could make my entrance to the press conference venue, though, one of the complex's residents stopped me. Excuse me, Representative Nim, preparations aren't finished yet. Now that I thought about it, since when did people of the industrial complex start calling me with that title? Didn't they used to call me the Demon King all this time? I ordered them to call you that. You being called Demon King Nim every single time kinda made me feel like we're this world's enemies or something. Well, sure, I guess. But CLHWSSI, is this really necessary? Before I knew it, I was pushed down on a chair. And then, my lips began quivering from the sensation of a soft brush tickling my cheek. The focused CLHWA replied seriously while painting my face. You're supposed to be our representative, so we must ensure that you look presentable first. Your words hurt in a variety of ways, you know. My companions were watching us from nearby as if they had found something quite entertaining. I felt like a monkey in a zoo. Han Soo-young fidgeted around with my hair from behind and asked me, "By the way, will you remain as a blondie forever?" No, it's because of the great sage's status seeping into me. I should go back to normal in a little while. Your hair is really soft, though. Constellation, most ancient liberator, says that his hair is the result of an extensive, arduous training regime. It's finished. YCLHWA finished painting me in an instant and spoke while placing a mirror before me. Although it was a bit embarrassing to say this myself, a man handsome enough to ponder whether to slap Yoo Jung-hyuk's cheeks or not was staring back at me in the reflection. I sneaked a glance to my side, but my companions weren't saying anything. Several steps away, Yoo Jung-hyuk was glaring at me with eyes implying how unimpressed he was. Kim Dak-ya. I nodded, put my coat on, and placed the unbreakable faith on my hips. With the exception of the formal business suit underneath, this was my regular combat outfit, through and through. Let's go. We entered the press conference venue. Countless stars and cameras were now looking at me in this wide-open outdoor venue. Near blinding rays came down from the spotlights above. My companions and I were being projected on a giant holographic panel. Loud cheerings came from the residents of the industrial complex. What accompanied the outpouring of their cheering were the stories of those waiting for me. The absolute majority of constellations are focusing their attention on your decision. The absolute majority of constellations are curious about the name of your final fable. Those that worry about the safety of the Korean peninsula, and constellations that were curious about this planet's future. Those who were scared of what lay waiting in the final scenario, and those who worried about their own survival. Beings who were concerned about the power we possessed and were trying to take it away. Those saying why we chose to appear only now, and the incarnations pleading with us to take them to the final scenario. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, is starting his story. As the countless questions flooded in, my fable made a move. The skis wavered and the ground quaked. When the status of a myth-grade constellation was unleashed, the entirety of the peninsula seemed to sink into a pit of silence. Every single one waiting for my answer looked at me. I slowly opened my lips. Everyone. And then I began my story. I have no thoughts of saving you. Episode 92, Final Scenario 1 Finn. Chapter 483, Final Scenario 2. My declaration caused unrest among the crowd. Reporters ceaselessly snapped away with their cameras. Lower and mid-rank docubus reporting the situation on their own channels were now carrying astonished expressions on their faces. Many constellations find your statement quite interesting. Great docubus are closely listening to your statement. Every docubi from the Bureau is focusing on your words and actions. What do you mean by that? Representative Kim Dokyanim. It was truly something else to witness the constellations, incarnations, and even the docubus carrying the exact same expressions. With a friendly little smile on my face, I opened my mouth once more. It's exactly as I said. I simply can't see the reason to save you all. Are you saying you will throw away Korea? In that case, what will happen to all the incarnations that supported you until now? Support, was it? How did they support us then? Agitation spread out in an instant. My quizzical tone of voice caused the reporters to shoot up from their seats and start yelling at me. As expected, the power of media seemed to be mighty enough to even oppose a myth-grade constellation status. Who do you think has been overlooking the Kim Dokya Company's tyranny? Didn't everyone go along with your wishes until now? Overlooking the tyranny, was it? Before I could respond, though, constellations chimed in first. A portion of constellations are mocking the reporter's statements. Korean Peninsula's ancient constellations are in lamentation. Constellation, Goryeo's first sword, is glaring at the descendants. Never mind whether it was a tyranny or not. I didn't even know what exactly they had been overlooking so far. Wasn't there demonstrations against Kim Dokya Company taking place every single day on the devastated Uido even now? I quietly stared at the various shouting reporters before asking them, and what exactly were my wishes? That is, have I ever asked any one of you to do something for me? Right there and then, the reporters shut their mouths and glanced at each other. Docubus were now forming expressions of genuine interest. To them, even things like this should prove to be an entertaining fable. Well, it was an event of the demon king of salvation, forsaking his own land after all. What rescued the reporters falling into the pit of confusion was a group of incarnations bidding their time on the side of the industrial complex. It's only natural for the one possessing great power to shoulder the responsibility, and you are abandoning that responsibility right now. An old man wearing a shabby hat suddenly stepped forward and said that out aloud. Shady, cunning glare in his eyes could be seen beneath the crooked rim of his headgear. I couldn't immediately remember who it was, but that line, it also appeared in the Ways of Survival. I heard Yi Jai-Hai's voice coming from behind. What the hell, that geezer also showed up here. It seemed that the group belonged to the Alliance down in Busan. The hidden movers that took over the Alliance while we were away from the peninsula had finally revealed themselves, in other words. Behind them, the clearly visible flags of the Veterans Association waved by the ones wearing blue headbands. And then, Alliance members from the countryside stood left and right of this group and angrily raised their voices. Demon King of Salvation, you must uphold the duty of the strong. Are you not the sole, myth-grade constellation active within the Korean peninsula? Some emphasized what my duty was, while I beg of you, do not abandon the Korean peninsula. If you behave like this, what will the poor citizens of this land do in turn? Some tried to appeal to my sympathy. Please, take us with you to the final scenario. Everyone who managed to survive until now has the right to be rewarded properly. No one among us wanted to become a part of this scenario. Are you planning to abandon all these innocent people? Can you even claim to be this peninsula's constellation then? In a certain way, they were right. No one among us wanted to be a part of the scenarios, not initially anyway. I see that the various heads of the alliances are present as well. That's good. However, was the story still the same even now? I wanted to ask you all something. Just what exactly have you been doing until now, when the final scenario is just around the corner? The Alliance members all looked at each other when they heard me. We protected the peninsula while you were away. Are you looking down on all the hard work the alliances have performed? It was us that protected our peninsula during your absence. I already knew what they had been doing anyway. Meanwhile, I spotted a few alliance members exchanging glances with reporters. Publish the article. Let everyone know that the Demon King of Salvation is giving up on the Korean peninsula. Most likely, they were inciting the mass media. The Demon King of Salvation, revealing his true colors of a demon king. I could imagine the headlines already without even asking them. I knew why they were willing to go this far, of course. No need to be scared. The Demon King of Salvation is still a human in the end. He's just another Korean, okay? As long as he's born in this land, there are some things he can't go against. Even if he now possesses great power and fame. They still believed in the system. They believed in the story of democracy upheld by humanity for a long time, the fables like rationalism and institution, or even something like majority decision. Ancient fables are now looking at you. I could see it now. Everyone believed they held a share in these fables, but in reality, no one did. Even before Star Stream arrived on Earth, this place had been under the rule of a great fable, and those believing in this great fable were under the impression that they couldn't be wrong. The Alliance members continued to shout. Didn't Kim Dok-ya Company monopolize the scenarios from the very start? What can we be expected to achieve under such unfair competitive conditions? But the industrial complex's door is always open to you. All the skills and fables we acquired are all publicly available, aren't they? No, but because you people entered the scenarios first. There are plenty of people from other countries who entered the scenarios belatedly. Divisions led by Fei Hu or Ranveer Khan are home to many who have joined only a few months ago, but now find themselves in the latter half of the scenarios. That's the story for other countries. Our situation isn't the same. They don't have the industrial complex. Their support structure is focused on extremely few individuals, too. However, what is it like for Seoul? I snapped my fingers and BU created a panel in the empty air above. A shot of the industrial complex's interior was displayed on it. We publicly made available the methods to clear the lower-ranked scenarios, and even released the list of Great Fable scenarios as well. And we didn't hold back with our support to those willing to diligently enter the scenarios too. We didn't place any restrictions on sex, age, race, none of those. Because what we were looking for were brave people willing to fight alongside us. The panel now displayed incarnations going through repeated harsh training regimes, and my mother commanding them. The faces of both Jo Yong-ran and Yi Bok-sun working as instructors could be seen next. And so, they reached this far after going through hellish training and earned their own fables. I'm talking about these people right before you. There were incarnations possessing indomitable air and vigorous statuses guarding the center of the conference venue. They were none other than the wanderers my mother had raised. The heroes that helped my mother stop the tsunami waves by the eastern shoreline were these very people. Is there anyone among you present today that received worse support than these people? No one replied. They were all overwhelmed by the fighting spirit emanating from the wanderers right before their noses. People faltering and biting their lips started shouting again. It's not like we kicked back and enjoyed ourselves all this time. We've been preparing for various things, maintaining the systems and infrastructures, and getting ready to rebuild our nation once you finish the scenario and come back. But why are you getting ready for that? Do you even know what kind of conclusion is waiting at the end? What? Why do you believe that this world's conclusion will be peaceful? This world had changed a lot from the one found in the ways of survival. Yu Yonghyuk, Yi Hyunseong, Yi Jaihai, Shin Yuseung, everyone had changed somewhat from what I used to remember. However, some things didn't change. Everyone Yu Jung-hyuk had met all wished for things to go back to how they were. Fluster was quickly dyeing the people's expressions. Expressions of being betrayed by that one hope they had been holding onto. I knew very well what they wanted, of course. However, there were none among them that truly desired for everything to go back to how they were. What this crowd wanted wasn't peace for everyone, but for individuals. They had experienced hellish scenarios and managed to survive. And those who experienced such ordeals definitely didn't want to see everything go back to how it used to be. Because the hell they lived through had become a part of their stories now. It'll be fine as long as the final scenario is over. I now possess power. At the bare minimum, I'm now in a position to act like a boss among the incarnations. I can't go back to how it was. Just how hard did I struggle to get this far? If only the Kim Dokya company wasn't around. As the countless desires seethed under the surface, I slowly turned my head and looked at the outer edges of the conference venue. The Alliance members and certain folks standing even further away than the reporters were looking up at this side. Ordinary incarnations covered in dust and wearing shabby, dirty clothes and equipment were standing there. Among them, I saw a young girl. She was only as tall as Shin Yuseung during the initial stages of the scenarios. She was so young that it must have been a miracle for her to survive this far. And while standing in that place that cameras and channels didn't even pay any attention to, she whispered to herself in a voice that only I could hear. "Does that mean we are all going to die?" The cameras and their shutter flashes continued to go off, but I only stared at that girl for a long time. And eventually, I opened my mouth. "I'm not a hero. From the beginning, I never planned to save any of you, and I'm not planning on doing that in the future as well. However," I slowly looked behind to find. It's possible that the other representative might be holding a different opinion than mine. Yu Jung-hyuk standing there. A little while later, me and Han Soo-young were listening to Yu Jung-hyuk's speech from behind the stage. I also don't know what the conclusion that guy had been thinking about is like. However, even I too think about the world's conclusion that I wish to see. In normal times, the extent of his vocabulary would be limited to, "I'll kill you Kim Dok-ya." But once he got going, he knew how to make a cool-sounding speech. He wasn't the protagonist for nothing, after all. Han Soo-young wordlessly stared at me while sucking on a lemon candy. I spoke as if to make an excuse. "It's not like I can step up to the front and command everyone forever, you know. Yu Jung-hyuk suits such things better than me, even back in the original too." She began grinning, so I added something else. "We need a much more trusty pivotal figure, and that's not my role. But you could do it, though. It's time that we revert back to how things should be. I'm not a protagonist but a reader, remember." Oh my, really, after coming this far? I hid my hands behind me and continued to clench and unfurl my fists. Indeed, even if this Kim Dok-ya had become a myth-grade constellation, I was still Kim Dok-ya at the core. My palms were still soaked in sweat. Standing before the cameras was never an easy thing, no matter the occasion. "Is that the proper conclusion you've been thinking about?" "It's the beginning. What comes after this then?" I didn't answer her. "Hey, you." She strode closer, lifted herself up on the tiptoes, and grabbed hold of my collars. "You haven't forgotten about the promise to read my novel, have you?" "Huh. We promised, you forgot." I looked into her blazing eyes and finally recalled the conversation we had in the past. Right, while exiting from the Kaiksanix archipelago, Han Soo-young did tell me that. She said that she wanted to write a novel once all the scenarios had ended, and when the time came, she wanted me to read it. "You were being serious back then. You think I'll lie about something like that?" I could only grin wryly. "I've got a high standard, so will it be okay with you?" Oh, a dude with a high standard kept reading trash like Ways of Survival for 10 years straight. I might end up writing a bad review, though, pointing out that it's got no probability, and say stuff like I'll be dropping this series in my comments, you know. Go ahead, you'll see what happens next. I quietly stared at Han Soo-young's face. She looked back at me with a serious face, not a hint of backing down visible on that expression. Right, she was originally like this, wasn't she? I might end up nagging you for more chapter uploads. Not a problem. I've written 10 chapters in a single day before, so it's fine. My sense of reality seemed to weaken after I continued this tit-for-tat with her still holding my collars. The first time I met her, I never imagined that we'd end up as comrades like this. Han Soo-young, who was once the king of the prophets. Once upon a time, I discriminated between those that needed to survive and people whose death didn't mean anything. We could hear Yoo Young-hyuk's voice drifting in. I always believed that some had to die while some needed to carry on. I believed that was a necessity for the sake of this world. But now Both Han Soo-young and I stopped yapping while listening to his speech. Here was Yoo Young-hyuk's inner thoughts that he had never revealed to anyone directly. His inner side that even the ways of survival failed to shed a light on could be heard now. But now I'm not sure anymore. The protagonist of the ways of survival was speaking his heart. Behind his back, the fables of the regression turn we lived through flowed out. He was the sole existence in this world who couldn't forget the previous world, the protagonist wounded and hurt by betrayals from the distant past. I received help from those I believed to be evil in my previous lives. We could see Yoo Young-hyuk battling against Asmodeus next. He then met his end after a fierce battle during the second regression turn. Then I fought on the same battlefield with the one who betrayed me before. Anna Croft, helping us fight off the apocalypse dragon. Yoo Young-hyuk stared at those fables for a long time before continuing on. I haven't forgiven them, but that doesn't mean I wish to seek revenge on them during this lifetime, because my life this time is not the one I had lived before, just like how this world is no longer the world that you used to know. People were listening to Yoo Young-hyuk's story. They were neither regressors nor protagonists. Even then, they all carried expressions of certain understanding. You surviving this far doesn't mean everything will be permitted to you. No, it simply means you now have more responsibility. The sin of living on, the sin of surviving by trampling on someone else's stories, the sin of using others' fables as your fertilizer and daring to spread your branches and sprouting new buds. So, if you're alive, then be responsible for those sins. Everyone that understood him, and even those who didn't, they all looked completely absorbed in his speech. These were the words of a human who lived his life cutting down constellations in the battlefields. He spoke neither the friendly words of consolation nor of encouragement, but without a doubt, he was still reaching them. His voice sounded far more sincere than the true voice coming from a constellation like myself. I can't make a promise of saving everyone. I merely try to survive the scenarios, and I certainly can't live through them instead of you. So, there is only one thing I can tell you right now. This was undoubtedly where Yoo Young-hyuk should be. Until the scenario for every one of you ends, I shall promise not to die or regress. Episode 92, Final Scenario 2, Finn. Chapter 484, Episode 92, Final Scenario 3. Yoo Young-hyuk's massive announcement caused the crowd to go silent. The movers of the alliances, not won over by his speech, continued to exchange knowing glances with each other, but the crowd was no longer within their ability to control. Conquering King, someone softly muttered. Soon after that, reporters began dreaming up of potential headlines all on their own. Conquering King Yoo Young-hyuk declares his desperate resistance. Kim Dokya Company's joint top representative Yoo Young-hyuk won't give up on the scenario till the end. Incarnations who heard about him being a regressor seemed to be even more excited than ever before. Some shouted out loudly, and the industrial complex was immediately filled up with the roars of cheering. Conquering King Yoo Young-hyuk. Yoo Young-hyuk, Yoo Young-hyuk. Everyone was now chanting his name. Even those making snide remarks against Kim Dokya Company earlier had been swept up in the flow and were staring at him now. Things wouldn't suddenly improve with this, but at a bare minimum, the foundation had been laid today. The world after the scenarios should now form with Yu Young-hyuk as its center. Even if I said the exact same things, I wouldn't receive a similar level of cheering. Probably. Han Soo-young finally released my collars and while looking in Yu Young-hyuk's direction, opened her mouth. If only he acts like that every day. I agreed with her. However, that was his personality so. Now that it got going, the chanting showed no sign of stopping anytime soon. The cheering that began with Yu Young-hyuk's name soon moved on to Jiang Hui-won, then Yehyun-seong, and even over to Ye Jai-hai. And as every name except the Demon King of Salvation was being chanted out, my companions shifted their gaze in my direction, looking clearly uncomfortable. I waved my hand at them to indicate that it was all right. They deserved to be cheered on anyway. Eventually, the chanting reached Han Soo-young's name, too. Black Flame Demon Empress Han Soo-young. The crowd in the audience gallery was now searching for Han Soo-young hiding behind the stage. I spoke to her, "It's your turn, go ahead." But she shook her head instead. "I hate stuff like that." "I thought you liked being the center of attention. Was I wrong?" "That's as a writer, not as Han Soo-young, you know." While lightly tapping on the ground with her heel, she lowered her gaze and frowned a little. When she didn't show up, the chanting naturally shifted over to Shin Yu-seung's name. The companions waving their hands on the venue, as seen beyond the curtains, came across as famous movie stars in my eyes. Korean Peninsula's constellations are proud of Kim Dokya Company. While watching them carry on, I spoke up as if to voice my thoughts. "Han Soo-young. What is it? If this world was a novel, which volume do you think we are in right now?" She seemed to ponder this quandary for a bit before making her reply. "Not sure. Depends on who wrote it, I guess. But of course, some might write a whole book out of what had happened during a single day, but some would condense everything that happened in 100 years into a single sentence." Han Soo-young continued on. "If it was me, we should be past at least the 20th volume. That's a lot." "It should be. Lots of things happened, right?" "Indeed, lots. Without a doubt, it had been a long journey." "If it was 20 volumes long, then just from the quantity alone, this book should be on the scale of a proper epic." Dusk was settling in from the skis above the conference venue. Not sure why, but it felt as if the sun was setting much sooner than usual today. Han Soo-young spoke as if she understood how I felt. "But then again, there are some people who can read all 20 volumes in one sitting, you see." Suddenly, a corner of my chest grew cold. I wanted to ask her, have I been reading every story that I found at a suitable pace? Could I say that I've read the stories of everyone precious to me thoroughly and didn't miss a single thing? "Kim Dokya. What is it? You may not be this world's protagonist, nor a really cool side character. However, you have read it with all of your heart, I know that." I didn't know what to say. "And everyone you've read, they are standing there now." Han Soo-young looked at the people by the press conference venue. I too stared at them. Comrades I cared about were standing on a spot almost within reach, just beyond the curtains. They existed beyond the curtains, alive and moving. Yu Young-hyuk glaring at the crowd, Jiang Hui-won grinning back at them, Ye Jai-hai jumping up and down in fluster, Shin Yu-seung waving her hand towards me. Someone had written their stories, and I had read them. Every story started off from there. While waving my hand back at Shin Yu-seung, I opened my mouth. "Tomorrow morning, we leave for the final scenario's location." After the press conference came to an end, the companions gathered in the reception room. Jiang Hui-won massaged her shoulder while looking at the rebroadcast of the conference. "IE cameras just aren't my friends, it seems." It wasn't just the Korean Peninsula, but the entire star stream was set abuzz by the Kim Dokya Company's press conference. "I have no thoughts of saving you," Jiang Hui-won tutted after watching Kim Dokya and his bright face making that declaration within the display panel. Seriously, though, he can't help himself with things people will hate him for. Still, doesn't he look more presentable now that his face has been fixed up properly. Yisyal in charge of Kim Dokya's makeup, nodded her head in satisfaction. Yijai added something else. Now that I think about it, does Dokya Ajasi's features come across a bit manlier now? I mean, he used to be on the paler side and kind of felt like a piece of stretched dough, you know. Oot, I was thinking the same too. A few among them nodded their heads in agreement. For sure, Kim Dokya of now had changed a lot compared to when they first met him. It wasn't just the impression he gave off, either. Jiang Huiwen muttered as if she was recalling the distant past. Honestly, I thought he was a bit of slick-tongued miser the first time I saw him. Just how different was Kim Dokya of the first scenario to that of a man about to face the final scenario? While listening to others chat on, Jiang Huiwen stared at Kim Dokya's face in the screen at his eyes, sparkling when he was reading the prepared script, or the corners of his lips that moved mysteriously when he smirked. Every little thing like that was serving as proof that he definitely exited in that place. While feeling those expressions loom closer than before, Jiang Huiwen began pondering Kim Dokya's fables. Could it be possible that the fables they had created together was changing him just a little? If so, that would be nice. What if their story had changed him like how he had changed them? By the way, where is Dokya SSI? I think he's making preparations for the final scenario. Wait, that Ajasi isn't cooking up yet another weird thing all by himself, right? Yijai's words caused a flitting shadow to cast over everyone's expression. The person who lifted the mood up was the smiling Yu Sanga hugging the two kids with both of her arms. He promised not to do that, so let us believe in him. Kim Dokya inside the screen was busy saying something only to be subjected to a barrage of insults. Jiang Huiwen watched that for a long time before placing her hand on the panel. She felt this lukewarm sensation. Can I really trust him? She whispered in a really quiet voice, yet everyone present caught that. Even then, no one among the group looked at her strangely. Shin Yuseung muttered out, Ajasi's skin looks so nice. They thought that they had grown closer to him by now, yet Kim Dokya's face seemed as distant as ever. Throughout the night, I had been thinking about the final scenario. I read the excerpts taken from the Ways of Survival that I found essential, and also spoke to Han Soo-young through Midday Tryst as well. It was to use her predictive plagiarism, to predict what might happen to us in the future. When I thought that alone wasn't going to be enough, I exchanged opinions with the secretive plotter through Yu Young-hyuk. Unfortunately, it was as if the plotter was trying to be as obtuse as possible when it came to the matter of conclusion. The path you're about to walk on hasn't been trodden by anyone. Taking cues from other world lines could become poison for the current you, instead. Since I understood what he was saying here, I decided not to query him any further. What about Anna Croft? She has withdrawn from the peninsula, along with Zarathustra's yesterday. It'd been nice to get the help from her precognition, but unfortunately, I seem to have lost that chance. Swiyish. The blade of the dark heavenly demon's sword scythed past the air. About a dozen or so steps away, Yu Young-hyuk was currently focused on his training. He seemed to be swinging in the exact same pose as before, yet he treated every and each movement with care as if they contained profound meanings. Maybe it was possible for him to repeat all those lives because he was capable of doing something like that. God admit, what kind of a crappy development is this? Han Soo-young was also racking her brain trying to guess how the final scenario might unfold. However, even she seemed to be stuck, going nowhere fast. Even if her predictive plagiarism was powerful, it wasn't truly omniscient. If that was the case, the 1863rd turn's Han Soo-young wouldn't have run into so much trouble. I studied her for a little while before switching on my smartphone. Files appeared on the screen from the original version of the Ways of Survival to its final revised version. 3 Ways to Survive a Ruined World Final Revision, TXT. I quietly stared at that file for a long time before turning the phone off. I didn't want to break the resolution I had been sticking to until now. Kim Dokya. I raised my head as the fourth wall called out to me. "What's up? Having a hard me." I smirked a little at that unexpected line of text. I had forgotten about this guy. The one who had stayed the longest with me so far was probably this wall, wasn't it? "It's fine, I have you." It was all thanks to the fourth wall that I managed to come this far. If this guy didn't alleviate my mental shock during the first scenario, and if it didn't mitigate the physical pain I suffered during the countless life-threatening situations, then I'd have ended up as the wandering ghost of the scenarios a long time ago. Sujut jut. Sparks danced in the air reminiscent of a small child's figure excitedly quivering about. For a very brief moment there, I thought I saw a triumphant face of a little kid above the dancing sparks. "Ahem, you wanna see you're at Rebute window." This guy, does he think I want to see the attribute window every time I have a chance? Nah, it's fine, I don't need it right now. Seeing it might help me out. However, there was something else even more important than that right now. Actually, there's something I'm even more curious about. Is it? It was a question I should have asked a long time ago. However, since I couldn't get any straight answers to begin with, I ended up coming up with all sorts of theories by myself concerning this very question. Just why is the final wall exactly? The fourth wall remained silent for a bit. I began thinking that it might try to change the topic or filtering might get thrown in my face here. Just how long passed by like that? It's a wah llwh, every scenario is written on. Was it because the final scenario was literally around the corner? Although the answer remained just as puzzling, it seemed that the fourth wall didn't want to hide the information anymore. So I asked again. Let me change the question. What are you exactly, and why do the fragments of the wall exist? Guard-ing the precious themes, as the walls do tie. Suddenly I thought of something. The wall of impossible communication Jang Hyong possessed. When I thought about it, it wasn't just her, was it? The important individuals from the ways of survival all possessed similar walls. Sakyamuni possessed the wall of samsara, while Agars and Metatron possessed the wall that divides good and evil. Bikausi, the ray is more in one theme. A fabli is a collection of ma in Waisto rise. The fourth wall was a fragment of the final wall, and the fragment meant that it could potentially be slotted back in its original position. In that moment, I felt clarity wash over me. If it was as I suspected, if this wall was the existence protecting the fable, then Sujajachu. The fourth wall's figure seemed to waver before my eyes in the air. Then, a library filled with countless bookshelves seemed to glimmer beyond it. I reached out into the air, causing the text from the books to scatter away. What replaced them, though, was an incredibly ancient and worn-down wall. This thing that reminded me of a prehistoric cave wall was the first wall. I extended my hand towards this wall that protected me from the cold, the pain, and from various trauma. From ancient times, walls were created to protect something. You mustn't prepare the last fabli, Kim Dak-ya. And starting from an unknown era, humans began writing something on that wall. That eventually became the fable. You are its last. Episode 92, Final Scenario 3 Fin. Chapter 485, Final Scenario 4. Are you all finished with your preparations? It was a regular morning like any other. The air was clean and fresh, and the complexion on the companions' faces wasn't gloomy either. If it weren't for their current combat attire, I'd have totally believed that we were on our way to a picnic from their expressions alone. And that's why Kim Dak-ya was truly happy. Preparations were done a while ago. Besides all that, it seems like you have something to say to us, Dak-ya SSI. When I snapped awake from my thoughts, I discovered Jiang Huiwan pressing her face closer to me. As I momentarily remained at a loss with my lips bobbing a little, Yijai quickly butted in. I don't want to hear it, though. He's going to say some stuff about it's too dangerous so we don't have to go etc., right? Right, since when was it not dangerous? This time it's serious. it'll really be dangerous. Yijai mildly raised her voice while mimicking my speech pattern. Hang on a sec, since when did I ever speak like that? I frowned deeply and opened my mouth. No, that's not it. This time really is. See, I knew it. Cough up the 100 coins, Iani. Jiang Huiwan pushed the coins to Yijai with a dejected face. Han Suyong watched this spectacle unfold and shook her head before addressing me. You better start learning, man. Learn what? You can only make your companions promise you the same thing so many times. If you persist with this, what will they start thinking next? Ah, this guy, he thinks our pledge is some kind of a joke. He sees every promise we made as a pack of lies. That wasn't my intention at all. Everyone, I genuinely apologize if you misunderstood. Having finished the handover of her 100 coins to Yijai, Jiang Huiwan suddenly asked a question. By the way, what's our plan this time? It looked like you were thinking up of one with Su Yong yesterday. There isn't one, actually. Perhaps finding my answer suspicions, she pressed her head closer once more. Really? It'll be different from how things had been so far. Even I don't know what will happen during the final scenario. That's weird. You aren't hiding anything, right? No, not at all. Character Jiang Huiwan is activating lie detection LV5. Your statement has been confirmed as a lie. Wowzers, you now even lie with a straight face. Just when did she learn lie detection? Damn it. I hastily made my excuse. It's difficult to give you a detailed story right now. Things might change later if I tell you something, you see. Regardless of what the scenario is, please choose what you believe to be the right decision. If we succeed, we will be able to survive together. And that we also includes you, Dakya SSI. I quietly stared at Yu Sanga before nodding my head. Yes. And we can all live together in a big house with everyone. That's correct. I haven't even graduated yet, so everyone will come to my graduation ceremony, right? That's right. Hyung, in that case, can we go to a PC bang? We can. Character Jiang Huiwan is activating lie detection LV5. Your statement has been confirmed as truth. Only then the hints of relief brushed past their expressions. I took a look at their faces one at a time. Yusanga, Jiang Huiwan, Yhyonseong, Yijai, Yigilyong, Shin Yuseong, Yisialhwa, Gongpildu, Jang Hyong, Han Suyong. If we're done here, let's get going. And even Yu Yonghyok too. Different stories existed for each individual, the stories that I hadn't had the chance to finish reading yet. Let's get going, Ajasi. We haven't even entered the scenario yet, so there's no need to make the heroic determination and stuff now, right? I agreed with Yijai's opinion. The final scenario hadn't even begun yet. I slowly breathed in and out deeply and raised my head to find a portal appearing on a spot high up in the air. Portal leading to 99th scenario has been generated. Bihyung had created that portal. Let's go. We stepped through the portal. The surrounding view crumbled away in an instant, only to be resurrected just as quickly. Behind us was the wide, expansive view of Starstream, while the front was dominated by the sight of Dakibus waiting for us. Didn't we come here before? Here was the gate of Starstream, the very last gateway that led to the final gate and home to the Bureau, the headquarters of all Dakibus. Kim Dakya Company, your entry qualification has been confirmed. It's a straight pass this time. Dakibus didn't bother with any complicated procedures and let us pass without a fuss. The absolute majority of constellations are watching your entry into the final scenario. Many nebulas are envious of your collective achievements. I sense the constellations and nebulas watching us from among the darkness of the universe. Constellations within the final scenario are growing tense at Kim Dakya Company entrance. You and your nebula have entered the final scenario's location. When I opened my eyes again, I was treated to the sight of the galaxy swirling around in a vortex. Countless stars were continuously circulating around while generating auroras. They were final scenario's constellations. Stars that had reached the myth grade a long time ago, or those that were receiving the graces of such beings. However, rather than approaching us, those stars remained circulating on the skies high above an ancient castle. Isn't that? And beyond the massive, ancient castle where the stars were dancing around, was a wall so vast that we couldn't even see its ends. Is that the final wall? I quietly stared at that wall. It was as if that wall spread out within the entire landscape, to arrogantly proclaim that this here was the end of this world line. Everything within this world exists to be recorded on it. King of Stories is now looking at you. King of Stories has summoned you. I was greeted by this jolting sensation that caused all the hair on my body to stand up. I could definitely sense it. A creature that moved the ginormous fable called Star Stream was waiting by the center of that wall. My companions must have sensed it too, since they all looked tense. Only you, Jung-hyuk, maintained that preternaturally calm expression of his. I don't see any constellations. It was as he said. Although we could see the stars spinning around in the skies, not a single constellation was walking around in their incarnated form. It was as if they knew we were coming, so they had all run off to somewhere. It was the great Dakibus welcoming us instead. Great Dakibai Hyach is incarnating into the scenario. Great Dakibai Harong is incarnating into the scenario. Great Dakibai Haram is incarnating into the scenario. Great Dakibai Horong is incarnating into the scenario. Great Dakibai Naksu is incarnating into the scenario. When Dakibus possessing mighty statuses appeared all at once, even I couldn't help but feel the oppressive weight from their combined aura. You've come, Kim Dakya Company. The great Dakibai Hyach, the dude who intruded upon the great war of saints and demons in order to recruit us, spoke up. He continued on with eyes of disdain squarely locked on us. You have all earned the qualifications of the final scenario. Since there is no need to test you, it'll be fine to simply enter the Ark. A detailed explanation will be provided afterwards. Ark. Even before my question could end, a loud, visceral boom resounded out from the center of the ancient castle. Its middle section opened up, and something began rising up from the castle's foundation. And it was a massive ship. The moment I saw that ship, déjà vu brushed past my brain. It was the ship first seen during the Great War of Saints and Demons. Indeed, its shape was of the vessel that saved us during the Great War of Saints and Demons. It looked uncannily similar to the Eden's Ark that evacuated us away from the fierce battle between the Apocalypse Dragon and the indescribable distance. The only difference being, this one was much bigger and sturdier looking than the Ark from that time. Its hull, seemingly carved out from the broken fragment of the wall, emitted both the contrasting white and dark rays of light. Great Dakibai Hyach continued on as he looked at that hull. Originally, this world line was earmarked as the final world line. However, things started becoming distorted during the process, and the world line's distortion is now well beyond salvageable. The conclusion of this world can't unlock the final wall, meaning the epic tale that could satisfy the most ancient dream cannot be completed anymore. What rubbish are you talking about? You all shall become the seeds. The seeds. I had heard of that term even back in the ways of survival, a term that denoted all the candidates of the one single fable. Violent sparks intermittently exploded in the distant darkness of the universe. They were ominous noises that seemed to imply the end of the distorted world line. A portion of stars got sucked into those deafening booms and were scattered away in flames before falling to the ground as shooting stars. The Dakibai continued on while looking at the falling stars. Think of it as a great honor. It was the will of the King of Stories that you were chosen as the seeds when you are responsible for ruining this world line. You shall ride on the Ark and move onto a new world line, and you shall be reborn as the core fable that will become the next world view, just like how those crossing over from the previous world have done. Only then did the things he was saying make sense. Basically, he was telling us to escape from this world. Are you really going to give up on this world that easily? You want to abandon this world line and leave with everyone here. You think such a suggestion even makes sense? Surely, there's no need to be that surprised. It shouldn't be such a bad suggestion for you people, too. Your goal is to reach the conclusion where no one has been sacrificed, isn't it? For a moment there, I became speechless. You have succeeded, Demon King of Salvation. You and your companions can now leave this world line and survive together. Explosion noises, mixed in with cracking thunderclaps, reverberated from the other side of the distant sky. It was the noise of the probability the Bureau had been protecting crumbling away. As I heard those noises, I belatedly began to understand several things, such as why there were no constellations to be seen nearby, or how could the Bureau possess such a powerful influence even from the very start of the worlds. Just how many times have you been repeating this? Is that really important? What happens to those who can't ride on the Ark? Those who didn't get selected, what will happen to them? You probably have guessed it already without asking us. Hyach used his chin to point behind us. That's where the turtle dragon Yijai had summoned earlier just in case was. And on top of that ship's deck, 4 sealing spheres emitting sparkling light could be seen, the outer gods, including the secretive plotter. I stared at the characters from the original novel, currently sleeping within the spheres. Those that got excluded by the scenarios would either die or become outer gods instead. New main scenario has arrived. Main scenario 99, Escape. Type Main. Difficulty. Clear condition. Enter the Ark together with the comrades from your nebula. Time limit 2 hours. Reward. You can cross over to a different world line by riding on the Ark. Your fable will start anew in that place, and the fables you have compiled so far will be recorded on Starstream's final wall to be passed down for all eternity. Failure. You will remain in the world being destroyed and die. Episode 92, Final Scenario 4, Finn. Chapter 486, Episode 92, Final Scenario 5. Companions all looked dumbfounded after confirming the scenario's details. It was such an incredibly simple, clear condition. As a matter of fact, it had to be the easiest out of all the scenarios we experienced so far. All we had to do was follow the great Dakibai's words and climb aboard the Ark and then leave this world line. Dakyo SSI. What are you waiting for? There can't be a better scenario than this one for you. I heard the voices of the great Dakibus floating in the air. Know that many constellations opposed you lot being chosen as the seeds. We chose you even if we had to go against the flow of those stars. Bihyung, his lips pale blue, was lowering his head amongst his peers. My head became complicated. Why did the King of Stories suddenly suggest such a scenario? The me currently couldn't figure it out. One thing's for sure, though, by listening to their suggestion, the survival of my comrades would be guaranteed. Kim Dakya Company's fable would be recorded on the final wall, along with all the other fables he hated. I turned around to find my companions staring at me. Everyone. I tried to say something, but it wasn't easy. A truly easy path was now available before eyes. If we choose this method, then we might not even need to resort to our plan. None of my companions would die too, and they wouldn't become outer gods as well. We simply had to get on that ship and cross over to another world line, and then live our new stories as if nothing had ever happened. We just had to become the rulers of the new world line with our fables. Just like the top gods of Olympus and Asgard, we'd simply live on while enjoying all the pleasures the scenario offered in sheer comfort. Dakyo SSI. My gaze met Yu Sang's as she looked squarely at me. However, would we be able to happily live in a big house in that place? Yijai was grasping the key ring attached to Twin Dragon Sword tightly, and would we be able to congratulate Jai-Hai's graduation with genuine smiles? Shin Yuseung and Yi Gil-yong were holding onto the ends of each other's clothes. Would I be able to go to a PC bang with Gil-yong-yi and play games with him, and go to the Han River with Yuseung-yi and share a pizza with her. Finally, Yu Jung-hyuk was glaring at me. Just like erasing the graffiti scribbled on the final wall, could we really pretend that everything that happened to us meant nothing at all? The apocalypse had begun, and that couldn't be turned back. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is waiting for your decision. Just like how the dead pair of Augurs and Metatron couldn't come back. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is observing your decision. Constellation, secretive plotter, is observing your decision. We couldn't erase the apocalypse dragon's second coming as if it had never happened, and just like how we couldn't change Yu Jung-hyuk's past regression turns. Everything that happened in this world was already a part of us. Han Soo-young opened her mouth. Kim Dak-ya, what are you hesitating for? You already know what needs to be done, don't you? Yi Hyun-seong approached me even before I realized it and placed his hand on my shoulder, as if he knew what I was about to say. My thoughts are the same as you, Dak-ya SSI. The fables we've earned together, and the things that might get left behind, we're all telling our story. People back on Earth, my mother and the Wanderers, those who shared the story with us but not here with us right now. Every fable of the Nebula Kim Dak-ya Company is now looking at you. The fourth wall is strongly vibrating. Some time ago, the secretive plotter said to me this. When we meet again, I hope you've become the proper master of that wall. Jang Hyong possessed the wall of impossible communication, while Yu Sang-a possessed the wall of samsara she inherited from Sakyamuni. Agars and Metatron possessed the wall that divides good and evil. And all these walls, each possessed a fable that would be written on that particular wall. In that case, what is the fable that should be written on the fourth wall? The fourth wall said this to me earlier, that I was the last of that final wall. The finale of all these fables. For the last time, I looked at my companions before I spoke my piece. I was trying to confirm whether we were making the wrong choice or not. I couldn't tell. There was no surefire way to figure out the truth, however. Do what you believe is the best, Dak-ya SSI. Ajasi will die together when the time comes, got that? Rather than the shameful survival, I much prefer the righteous end, actually. Their voices gave me courage. The fable boiling up from the deepest part of my body permitted my true voice to come out. We shall not be boarding the ark. It felt as if I could just about see the full stop to a story I had been pondering for the longest time. The great Dakibus were staring at me with frozen expressions. Every constellation within this world line was focusing their gazes only on me. As I felt each and every one of those gazes, this indescribable sense of freedom washed over me, too. And at that moment, Kim Dak-ya realized what the story not written yet in the Ways of Survival was. I had read every regression turn found in the Ways of Survival. I still remembered them all. However, there was one part that even I had failed to read. The epilogue. From the 0th turn to the 1863rd, every fable that I read was now gathering in one spot. The stories from the nebulas flowing within the heavens were being integrated into this world line. I sensed the constellations in the distance making their moves behind the scenes, too. Something was approaching here. Do you understand the brevity of what you just said? The great Dakibus were asking me. Some carried expressions implying that they already expected this outcome, while some looked quite flustered instead. Actually, neither should matter to them. After all, everything was simply fable to these creatures. Everything was the will of Starstream to them, after all. Starstream is proposing the names for your final great fable. You can now choose between two proposed conclusions. 1. Vagabond of the destroyed world line. 2. Ruler of the despairing starlight. The names of the last great fable we had completed floated up. I stared at the choices of conclusion given to me. Both of them sounded rather grandiose. And both of them couldn't contain their story in its entirety. I won't be accepting the fable names you have proposed. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, has rejected all the choices proposed by Starstream. Sujajajut. I shall not be completing the conclusion you're talking about. I slowly unsheathed the unbreakable faith from my waist. Most likely, this moment in time had been set in stone as soon as I first grasped this sword. Every fable of the Nebula, Kim Dokya Company, has begun their storytelling. Yu Yonghyuk unsheathed the dark heavenly demon sword, while Han Soo-young undid the bandages off her left hand. Jiang Huiwon raised her judge's sword, followed up by Yi Jaihai grasping the twin dragon sword with both of her hands. Yu Sangha spread out her lotus pedestal, and Shin Yuseung's chimera dragon began roaring on. Gong Pildu installed the armed fortress, faster than anyone, and I spotted Jang Haiyong standing at the very top of this fortress while releasing the status of a transcender. And finally, Yi Hyunseong stepped forward as if to protect everyone. They were speaking through their actions. That's why I could tell my story as well. I shall not let any one of you abandon this world line. Properly witness the end of the story you have created. Witness with your own eyes. What kind of an end awaits for the world of your creation? The status of the fable exploding forth from my entire body traveled on the unbreakable faith and extended forward. Stop this. The startled great Dakibus also made a move and withstood my status. I unhesitantly shot out the second, then the third, shockwaves from the fables. Starstream is responding to your group's action. Bureau is activating the probability. Even as the vicious storm of sparks tightened around my body, I didn't step back. All the fables we had created together were roaring on under the pain akin to our incarnation bodies being torn apart. Great fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Great fable, Torch that swallowed the myth, has begun its storytelling. Great fable, Season of Light and Darkness, has begun its storytelling. Great fable, Liberator of the Forgotten Ones, has begun its storytelling. Your great fable without a name has begun its storytelling. What determined a story's conclusion were the beginning, the development, and finally the climax that had come before it. Nothing else besides could determine what the conclusion would be like. I swung my fist towards the sparks before me over and over again. I even threw the unbreakable faith into the ripples of the blinding aftermath storm. Your action has caused Starstream to. The possibility of the predetermined conclusion is. The predetermined texts were shattering right before my eyes. The once legible words were changing to something illegible, as if cloudy dust had settled down on them. And when that dust eventually cleared, what I saw next was the utterly wrecked front hull of the Ark. Quiet. I was aware of what would happen by doing something like this. King of Stories is now looking at you. The One King is greatly pleased by your action. Even then, this was the best answer I could come up with. The method of finding the conclusion, not seen before in the original. The method of saving everyone while resolving the distorted probability. Reaching the end of this world through the predetermined Gisunjianjiol was impossible, because it was simply the template for the predetermined conclusion. Meaning this story wouldn't be able to cross the final wall. And that is why Kim Dokya refused the conclusion handed out to him. A giant rupture was being generated in the world. Your actions have crumbled the predetermined rules of the scenario. A portion of Starstream's plot is crumbling away. Starstream, emergency sequence is activating. The surrounding view suddenly began changing. I sensed the Starstream, trying its best to shoehorn me into its own conclusion. In the end, everything will become a scenario. Maybe the great Dakibus didn't know, or maybe they did know, yet had no choice but to simply carry on. Within this great scenario, even the storytellers would form a part of the scenario itself. Starstream happily accepts your actions. Starstream's final fable is waking up. Just like how a scenario happening outside of scenarios would still remain a scenario in the end. However, if everything would end as a scenario anyway, then I should be the one to decide which scenario to live in. So take a good look. Main scenario has been updated. Doc SSI. Comrades standing in my near vicinity all stared at me with dazed eyes. My incarnation body was changing along with tingling sensation, and also the ominous aura of exclusion rose up above my body too. I knew exactly what sort of a scenario this was. Magnia. The landscape of war spread out before our eyes. And opposite us, constellations were being summoned. Our enemies and comrades we once fought together, they were all there. Anna Croft, China's Fei Hu, India's Ranveer Khan, Japanese alliances Asuka Ren, Olympus and Asgard, and other constellations from not just Emperor, but other large nebulas were all incarnating under the star stream S probability. Every constellation of star stream was gathering here. Stars that kept amassing were burning brightly enough to illuminate the entirety of the universe. They were illuminating me as if they'd not permit even a single speck of darkness to exist in the cosmos. This was the star stream final battlefield. Tsuchachajajat. This was none other than the stage. The 1863rd turns Yu Junghyuk had fought on, the place where he had faced off against the seething outer gods and their outer god kings. If there was one thing different from back then and now, the enemy to be fought this time wasn't the outer god king. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is. Constellation, Goryeo's first sword, is. Indirect messages flooded in among the blinking stars. I heard Uriel and Black Flame Dragon's true voices, as well as my companions calling out to me. The sensation of chaos completely filling up my view caused dizziness to nearly overtake me. I blocked my ringing, deafened ears while slowly blinking my eyes. Main scenario has been updated. Main scenario 99, enemy of the story. Type main. Difficulty, indeterminable black square. The scenario message was being restructured in real time. Although its content couldn't be seen, everyone instinctively knew. They knew that, if this scenario ended in failure, the star stream would be destroyed. A short while later, the clear condition everyone's been waiting for finally showed up. For some reason, I couldn't help but recall a certain sentence from the Ways of Survival when I read the condition slowly rising up before my eyes. There are 3 ways of surviving a destroyed world. Comrades were shouting something while looking at me. The author of the Ways of Survival did say this. There were 3 ways of surviving this horrible world. 3 ways. I began thinking. 3 ways didn't mean that only 3 people would survive in the end. I looked back at my companions and grinned brightly. Clear condition. You must kill the enemy of the story, outer god King Kim Dakya. Finally, this world's epilogue had begun. Episode 92, Final Scenario 5 Fin. Chapter 487, Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 1. I'm a writer. Not too long after her novel got published, Han Soo-young began introducing herself like that. It was the same story during the blind dates she begrudgingly attended after her friend pleaded her to go. Ah, you're a writer. Her date must have heard about it before showing up here, so what was up with this fuss? The man quickly rolled his eyes around a little before asking her with a smile. Did you start your career through something like the annual literary contest in spring? No. Pardon in that case. I write web novels. Web novels. The problem always came after this bit. She spotted the man's eyes sneakily scanning her worn, cheap-looking t-shirt. Aha, so like, it's that, isn't it? Internet novels, those with a lot of emojis in them. Ah, yes, exactly like that. You know, there are lots of strange jobs to be found these days. YouTubers, internet authors. The man grinned and sipped the Americano resting right before himself. The watch attached to his wrist came from a pretty high-end brand. Hadn't she experienced a similar situation to this one plenty of times before? It's like everyone is trying to make easy money nowadays. Don't you think so? Said the man. Is there anyone who'd want to make money the hard way deliberately? I make about 100 million a year, but it's just not easy. So, like, Whenever I see those types of people, I can only sigh, trying to pilfer other people's money the easy ways. He must have already forgotten that this was a blind date, judging from the tone of his voice. With just a hint of anger in his eyes, his gaze shifted over to the car keys resting on the table. Looked like they belonged to a foreign brand, perhaps a bit too expensive considering his age. While letting the man's words go straight out of one ear, Han Soo-young switched on her smartphone. Alerts for new comments were clogging her inbox. Dear Authornum, isn't this too sweet potato-like? The next chapter will start with a cider moment, right? If not, I'll be exiting right about now. People who never studied hard once when they were young just stumbled into some random luck, said the man. Suddenly, it felt as if she could figure out why people read web novels. And she could also figure out why her friend introduced this sort of jerk-off to her, too. Apparently, she'd find out once she got here, and now she could clearly see what that friend of hers was thinking about when setting her up with this meeting. Now normally, she'd let this slide because it was just too bothersome, but... So were you listening? Yes, of course, your annual salary was. Only then did the man's eyes sparkle. His shoulders perked up as if he just knew she'd ask him about that subject again. It's 100 million after tax. It's similar to mine. Pardon? The man smirked. You're a writer, but your annual salary is 100,000,000. Han Soo-young shrugged her shoulders and pulled out her own car keys. It was the newest model from Porsche. More specifically, it was exactly 3 times more expensive than the man's own ride. Although, since she couldn't be bothered to, she rarely drove around in it. The man's eyes shook in sync with the shaking keys, and an awkward smile floated up on his face next. Haha, but a writer's income is inconsistent, so it can't really be called annual salary, am I right? I mean, your wage can't be fixed, right? The man's lips ceaselessly bobbed up and down to yap on about the cliched stuff. It was just about adequate enough to be used as some line muttered out by a throwaway villain during the next chapter or some such. In that case, the protagonist would reply like this. But I never said it's the annual salary. Pardon? In that case, is it what you amassed so far? No, I made 100,000,000 for the first half of this month, and since there are 2 more weeks left in this month. Excuse me. Only then the man seemed to have realized something, because his expression had changed quite drastically. In the end, this whole thing had unfolded in the way her friend wanted to. If this was a novel, it'd have been a cider moment, but in reality, she didn't feel all that good about it. The man was now hurriedly sending messages to someone. He was probably asking her friend that set this blind date up all sorts of questions. Excuse me, can you tell me the name of the novel you wrote? Just as she began thinking that she didn't want this guy to know the title, Han Soo-young's smartphone issued an alarm tone. Hello there, Authornim. I'm just a reader who enjoys reading web novels. I coincidentally ran across your novel and got to read it. She wondered what sort of a long-winded message this was. She then tapped on the message without thinking too much about it. The tone of it was polite but old-fashioned, and on top of that, she felt just a tiny hint of naivete, too. The novel you have written is far too similar to a novel that I really treasure, The 3 Ways of Surviving a Destroyed World. What the hell was up with this bastard? And that was Han Soo-young's first encounter with Kim Dokya. Kim Dokya. Han Soo-young watched the spectacle unfold before her eyes and ruminated on the memories of that time. She lost a portion of her memories while creating avatars, and she couldn't clearly remember what happened back then. What was certain, though, was that she had indeed read the novel called The Ways of Survival. All because of a fool with a username Kim Dokya, no less. Authornim, it was also a very enjoyable read today as well. Someone on the level of Han Soo-young could tell whether the novel would do well or not after reading only a couple of chapters. However, in her eyes, this Ways of Survival would never make it even if the sky collapsed on itself. It's a really interesting beginning. From the beginning, it was definitely dogshit. Authornim, does this mean Yu Young-hyuk remembers all those things? Then, back in the 70-second regression turn. It was far too obsessed with lengthy expositions, and Q, how unfortunate. I hope Young-hyuk will get his act together in the next regression. Today was another honey jam of a work, too. As for its protagonist, it was just a pretty boy devoid of personality that seemingly wasted all of his available skill points on his outer appearance. Not only that. Author Nim, congratulations on reaching the 2000th chapter. Since you've come this far, how about another 1000 chapters? Its chapter count was excessive as well. This is entertaining, seriously. Is he a nutcase? She got royally irritated and began following after this fool's comments. She even clicked on downvote too. Like a bewitched person, Han Soo-young read only Kim Dok-ya's comments and not the novel itself. Will Jae-hai finally awaken next chapter? Authornim, I've discovered a typo on page 7. With my lacking opinion, I think the spelling here should be, I looked into it and it's actually my mistake. My apologies. I've learned something new today. Please, just smack that fool Young-hyuk in the back of his head. This guy, he never once missed writing a comment on all those thousands of chapters. And every single one contained understanding and love for the world created by this author. Han Soo-young was envious of that. She believed that there was simply no way anyone would be reading a novel as bad as this, that it had to be the author himself busy blowing his own trumpet. She thought that the author had created two separate IDs and wrote the novel with one while with the other one, wrote all those comments and uploaded recommendations, too. Isn't recommending one's own work prohibited? Just like how Yu Young-hyuk was an imagined character to Kim Dok-ya, Kim Dok-ya was exactly like that to Han Soo-young. She thought that such a person wouldn't be real, but that very person within the texts was standing right before Han Soo-young's eyes. Dok-ya Sasai. A loud ringing in the ear rang out, accompanied by explosions going off in all directions. Han Soo-young could see Kim Dok-ya in the center of the battlefield swirling like a thunderstorm, busy breaking past the intense outpourings from the stars. Incarnations were screaming out while the stars were roaring loudly. And in the meantime, Dokibus in the sky were laughing. Kim Dok-ya was shouting out. However, Han Soo-young couldn't tell whether he was screaming, proclaiming, or even crying in sorrow. Now that he had been transformed into an outer god, even his voice had been completely excluded from the scenarios. Didn't matter what he said, the contents were deemed unimportant now. Jae. However, there were more outer gods following him now. Vestiges cast away by the innumerable world lines were now gathering near Kim Dok-ya's side. And then, there were myth-grade constellations waiting for him above the skis of the scenario. So it has finally begun. The king of Olympus and the ruler of the 12 gods, the lightning throne, Zeus, was there. This world line, final scenario has begun. Every existence has acquired the scenario entry qualification for the final scenario. Please kill the enemy of the story, Kim Dok-ya. The scenario messages popped up soon afterwards. Everyone present understood the current situation. Zeus was the first to open his mouth. Sweep them away. Along with heaven-collapsing noises, arcs of lightning belonging to Zeus rained down. With a pow, noise of something exploding, blood splat onto Han Soo-young's cheek. The nameless ones were dying as black blood spurted out from them. Sperm. Even the frightening outer gods came across as mere water balloons in front of the combined status emitted by the myth-grade constellations. The outer gods vomited out discarded fables as they exploded en masse. Blindingly brilliant shower of lightning rained down, and in the center of the devastated landscape, Kim Dok-ya was enduring against Zeus's electrical attacks. Why did he make that kind of a choice? Tear his wings off, surround him from all sides. Along with the roars from the constellations, a massive army rushed in. Incarnations and constellations that had broken past the hellish scenarios to get this far were flooding in, all of them united as one under the single goal of eliminating Kim Dakya. The one to come to his aid was the great sage, now one soul and body with him. Constellation, most ancient liberator, is unveiling his status. Another electrical arc haughtily flowed in the air. The great sage's own lightning pushed away Zeus and tore through the sky as if it was paper. For a moment there, the constellation's spirit seemed to wane, but a voice of encouragement resounded out next. It's the great sage, heaven's equal. Do not back away, kill him and the scenario will end. This is the final scenario of this world line. This expectation that they would finally be freed from everything. Among them were faces of constellations and incarnations she had seen in passing before. No need to feel guilty here, he chose this for himself. Olympus, Veda's papyrus guardian tree, 12 earthly branches emperor. Constellations and incarnations from those nebulas she had heard of at least once before were all here now. Every one of them knew who Kim Dakya was. Every single one of them raised their swords in order to kill Kim Dakya. Through the torn black coat, the white coat underneath could be seen. Kim Dakya taking on a role that didn't suit him was there. The tattered Kim Dakya with a demon king's horn, and his black and white wings spread open wide. Kim Dakya standing in front of the outer gods and swinging his sword towards the enemies. She thought that her vision suddenly grew blurry. Then Kim Dakya's figure began erasing. The strange light in the eye unique to the cephalopod, and the exterior giving off the dark, damp impression. Where Kim Dakya used to stand was now dominated by a giant outer god king that seemed to be a mixture of all the traits found in every monster of this world. The enemy of the story. As a writer herself, Han Soo-young could instinctively tell. If this world was a novel, then Kim Dakya was the final boss, and this story would only end with the death of that Kim Dakya. Han Soo-young. Someone pulled her back. Almost right away, a rapid arc of electricity flew past in front of her nose. Step back, hurry. It was Yu Sang-ah, only she seemed to have maintained her wits within this scene of pure anarchy and confusion. But how could she? Everyone, you must regain yourselves. Dakya Sasai is right now. Kim Dakya would die at this rate. We made a promise with Dakya Sasai. Have you all forgotten it? Kim Dakya was a liar. Dakya Sasai really wouldn't do the same thing again. Always believing in the goodness of a person, that was Yu Sang-ah. And because she was like that, because she could believe in the others, she managed to be not shaken up by this situation. And that was precisely why she always clashed with Han Soo-young until now. Even with Yu Sang-ah's shouts, the companions still carried empty expressions. With dazed eyes, they were each submerged in their own thoughts. The same question was grabbing hold of them. Why did Kim Dakya make that kind of choice? But they made a promise. He swore that he'd not sacrifice himself in this manner ever again. Just why? This story is not over yet. Yu Sang-ah was wrong, though. The direction of this story had been chosen already. Kim Dakya had become the enemy of the story, and this stinking scenario would end only when he was dead. The author responsible for writing this tragedy had chosen it that way. The author. Kim Dakya's voice sorrowfully reverberated out. That voice returned to her as memories from a certain moment in the past. Han Soo-young, you're a writer, right? Her brain kicked into gear. What are you going to piss me off with this time? I wanted to ask you about something. What is it? Are writers truly omniscient within the stories they write? What's up with this totally out of the blue utterance? No, well, it's just that I'm kinda curious. While you were writing, were you in control of everything? Like, this person would act like this, and that person would behave in this way. That, obviously. Han Soo-young also confidently made her declaration. Can't be controlled. Why not? Aren't you the author? You think an author is a real god or something. Doesn't the author create everything within a story? Situations, characters. Han Soo-young muttered, you don't know anything, and carried on. All the characters would start acting on their own the moment they are created. Authors simply provide them with stages, that's all. It's all up to the characters themselves on how they would respond to the situation and make their moves. Not as a figure of speech, but for real. Yeah, really. You know, that's a really lazy way to write, don't you agree? Wanna die. Kim Dok-ya got bent in half when she punched him in the guts. What was he thinking about back then? Interesting. Even an author isn't the god of the stories. In that case, just who determines the scenarios then. From the tip of her toes, this incredible chill crept up all over her body. Maybe, just maybe, Kim Dok-ya over there right now was the answer to that exact question. Su-jud-jud. Perhaps he was thinking about that one method to change the conclusion of this stubborn world of scenarios. Great docubus are panicking from the deluge of the probability. Starstream is paying attention at the course of the shaking probability. Scenario wasn't perfect. Final scenario is going through a rapid change. It was definitely the author who created the story. However, it was the characters that lived within that very story, and the one that determined their fate was. Korean Peninsula's constellations are cheering on the Demon King of Salvation. Eden's constellations are cheering on the Demon King of Salvation. Underworld's constellations are cheering on the Demon King of Salvation. Constellations of planets with unknown names are cheering on the Demon King of Salvation. Countless constellations are donating coins. The absolute majority of the constellations are watching the Demon King of Salvation's last battle. The ones watching that story. Su-jud-jud-jud. Many constellations don't wish for the Demon King of Salvation's death. The only beings that could change the scenarios. Kim Dok-ya hadn't become the enemy of the story to die, and he certainly didn't choose sacrifice in order to betray his companions either. The ways of survival was Yu Young-hyuk's story. In that case, whose story was this world? Han Soo-young watched the world's probability shake unsteadily and bitterly muttered to herself. That's right, no reader would want to see the protagonist get killed. Kim Dok-ya's and Kim Dok-ya Company influence had grown incredibly in this world. The proof of that was him becoming the subject of the final scenario. Constellations, whether they liked it or not, all watched Kim Dok-ya's fable, and they either sympathized with it or were jealous of him. Every star in this world was watching his story regardless of whether he wanted it or not, and most likely, Kim Dok-ya himself was aware of that. Perhaps he could have been thinking about it for a long time. This was the last gamble Kim Dok-ya made after becoming the character. She sensed Kim Dok-ya glancing in her direction from afar, as if to say she should be able to understand since it was her, as if to say she should be able to start a brand new story that no one knew from this moment on. He was sacrificing himself not to sacrifice himself. It could very much be an impossible task. The conclusion could be forever out of their reach. However, this was the only no one will be sacrificed method Kim Dok-ya could come up with. So the things Han Soo-young had to do now was pretty clear. That guy alone can't do it. Han Soo-young looked behind her. She needed to let her companions know what exactly Kim Dok-ya wanted to achieve here. Unfortunately, there was something that Han Soo-young, absorbed in her own attempt at understanding, failed to realize. Fable, predictive plagiarism, is predicting the character's mentality. And that was the fact that not everyone here was an author, meaning not everyone could see this situation in an objective manner like her. Even before Han Soo-young could open her mouth, someone among the companions dashed forward first. The clear-cut animosity was permeating within the unsheathed blade. Han Soo-young realized the direction this sword light was aimed at and cried out in pure shock. Wait, hold on, that guy, he's trying to. She knew whose sword it was, and that's why she couldn't believe it. Right in this moment, this one person grew to deeply resent Kim Dok-ya. The strongest sword of Kim Dok-ya that had been protecting him for a very long time, and that sword was making a move to end this scenario. Episode 93, Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 1 Fin. Chapter 488, Episode 93, Omniscient author's Viewpoint 2. Your black is black. When Jiang Huiwan first heard that message, she felt a bit weirded out. She recalled what Kim Dakya told her some time ago. He said that each individual had a specific ending reserved for them. So, she believed that she too would have something like that as well. However, it was black. Jiang Huiwan knew someone that suited such description far better than her. The person she fought alongside the closest than anyone. The person she wouldn't hesitate to become a sword for. The person who treated his comrades preciously. The person who always sacrificed himself first. That's why, a person she couldn't help but resent. Jiang Huiwan broke past the waves of nameless ones and ran. Venomous liquid exploded nearby and splashed onto her thigh, boiling her flesh dark. She urgently pulled out the internal healing salve CLHWA gave her earlier and applied it on the wound, then started running again. She shook off the constellations trying to interfere with their outpouring of attacks, and leapt up by stepping on the nameless ones surrounding Kim Dakya as if to protect him. She could see something far away, something that used to be Kim Dakya. And now, the being that had become the enemy of the story. Huiwan SSI. Yi Hyunseong managed to get to her and grabbed her shoulders. Hold on. Even before he could continue with his words, a message popped up first instead. The final scenario streaming to all locations will begin. Every channel within Starstream was now opening up. Sujut. The scenario message flickered about unstably. Everyone, don't panic and just focus on the scenario. This scenario will be the final one for you. Once you hunt down the outer God King, your long journey will come to an end as well. This story shall be recorded on the final wall, and the journeys of the stars will become the epic tale that shall be handed down for all eternity. Great Dakibus greedily shouted out. Their eyes were burning with naked desire to record the fable they had guided till here on the final wall. Great fable, brilliance of the ancient dawn, dreams of the final story. Great fable, master of Asgard, dreams of the final story. Great fables were writhing viciously now. To remain as the one single fable, these great fables were urging on the constellations and incarnations. Constellation, spear that draws the borders of the oceans, is pulling out his weapon. Constellation, master of Abydos, is incarnating into the scenario. Constellation, River Nile's monster bird, is roaring out viciously. However, not everyone was being led around by that urging. Despite the orders from the first-seat god Zeus, several gods from Olympus, including Dionysus, were hesitating to attack. It was the same story for the incarnations as well. Do we really need to kill that person? The one to say that was the Japanese incarnation, Asuka Ren. The Kim Dakya I met was not a villain. She's right, Kim Doja is not a bad person. They were people who received help from Kim Dakya's companions during the fight against other Japanese that chose to become the calamities of the Peaceland. Besides them, several incarnations affiliated with Emperor and Olympus agreed with them. Quite a few constellations agree with the opinions of the incarnations. Starstream, probability is falling into unrest. Once they detected the probability moving towards a suspicious direction, the great Dakibus quickly stepped forward to rectify that. Do not forget, everyone, he's the enemy of the scenario. You may not be aware of this, but from the beginning, Kim Dakya had been clearing the scenarios with the purpose of ruining this world line. Quite unlike themselves, these usually arrogant great Dakibus began speaking in a polite tone of voice. And as the footages of fables began playing in the vast skies above, the Dakibus speciality began as well. He betrayed this world line and made deals with the outer gods. Inside the screen, Kim Dakya was making a deal with the secretive plotter. Since there was no voice being transmitted, his expression came across as especially sinister. That wasn't all. Everything he had done so far was now being laid bare to the rest of the world. From when he released the grasshoppers in the subway and didn't try to save anyone else, to when he didn't do anything back in the Jumho station, even though he could have saved many others. This collection of only the worst moments of someone was trying to create a brand new Kim Dakya in this world. If he achieves his goal, then only the pure destruction awaits this world. Soon, the screen changed to that from the journey to the west. The great fable liberator of the forgotten ones. It was the scene of him, surrounded by the outer gods, liberating the nameless ones trapped inside the scenario. Unfortunately, perhaps due to the Dakibus interference, him inside the fable no longer looked saintly. No, he truly looked like the leader of a cult freeing demons in order to really destroy this world. He acquired the knowledge of the future through uncommon means, and he used that for his own benefit. Kim Dakya, holding onto his smartphone, was now ordering his companions around. Him becoming the demon king of salvation, then the watcher of light and darkness, they were all simply part of his plan. The storytellers worked together to drag Kim Dakya's position down from protagonist to the villain. They were changing his fable into a sly and cowardly one. Starstream's probability is mobilizing. This action definitely went against the nature of the storytellers themselves. Even then, these great Dakibus didn't hesitate 1 second, because these storytellers also desired their own black as well. And now he has become the outer god monarch to destroy this world. The public sentiment within Starstream was rapidly changing. Asuka Ren's complexion paled greatly. Anna Croft and her unreadable expression walked past the Japanese woman's side and muttered to the latter. "It's too late now." Zarathustra's began advancing forward, and those constellations greatly hesitating also joined in the battle. Gaia. The nameless ones, screaming in pain, collided against the front of the constellations. All the creatures related to Kim Dakya were pointing their blades at each other. And Jiang Huiwan found herself in the middle of this battlefield, watching Kim Dakya's fight. Even if she didn't help him out, there were plenty of outer gods fighting alongside him next to him. They were huge cephalopod-type monsters, outer gods with baby-like bodies yet with heads of giant flowers, etc. Even if Jiang Huiwan borrowed Uriel's powers and went all out, she'd not be able to win. Standing among them, Kim Dakya truly looked like the great calamity trying to end this world line. Jiang Huiwan thought that she understood Kim Dakya. She didn't know the conclusion Kim Dakya truly wanted. However, she believed that she knew without being told what it was. She thought that the end of the world she wanted was the same as what he wanted. However, could this be the end he truly wished for? Maybe there was no such thing as comrades to him. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is. She knew, Jiang Huiwan knew better than anyone what Uriel was trying to say. She also knew that Kim Dakya treasured his comrades, perhaps too much, and that's why he was capable of doing something like this. Kim Dakya, he was planning to sacrifice himself and allow his companions to see the end of this world. No matter how far she reaches out, she just couldn't touch him. It was as if a huge wall was standing before her eyes, and this wall was preventing her from getting nearer to him. Just how? Perhaps Jiang Huiwan was too exhausted now to long for the desired conclusion. Kim Dakya is a type of person who didn't listen to anyone. The grip of the sword in her hand felt cold. This sword that Kim Dakya had personally crafted for her and placed in her grasp. This sword that remained as the symbol of her beliefs from the paradise all the way to here. Judge's sword is crying out. The sword that should react only in the vicinity of evil was now crying out. The great Dakibus declared as if to make a mockery out of her. This is the hidden truth regarding the enemy of the story, Kim Dakya. She wanted to confirm it. If you are truly the Kim Dakya that I know, and if what you want isn't the same as what I want, then whether it'd be all right to end him with her own hands. Huey 1 SSI. As if he understood her heart, Yi Hyunseong remained next to her side. I shall go with you. He literally became a shield of forged steel and ran forward while creating a path. He pierced through the waves of the stars and storms of the nameless ones. Just as Jiang Huiwan had something to confirm, so did Yi Hyun-seong. Something that needed to be confirmed over and over again. Quack 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 quack. As if riding on the wave itself, the two of them flew up and landed near Kim Dokya's rear in an instant. Such a thing was only possible because the other outer gods were all concentrated on his front. Huiwan SSI. Was it because of the ring of chaos drawn on the back of her hand? The nameless ones ignored her even after discovering her presence and simply rushed forward. Kim Dokya, standing tall like a huge skyscraper, was now before her. Thick, pitch-black liquid dripped from that massive body. Without even realizing it, Jiang Huiwan reached out and touched that exterior. It was unfamiliar. In the past, she got to hold the sleeping Kim Dokya's hand tightly. It was after he returned from another world, passed out for the whole day in a room the companions had prepared for him. What did his hand feel like back then? Perhaps he sensed her presence, because the large head of the outer god king shifted and looked behind himself. Kugugugugu. White breath leaked out from that huge head. Kim Dok. Even though she knew she shouldn't, Jiang Huiwan still ended up taking several steps back. His huge jaw was opening towards her. Scenario's probability is activating. All of your fables are warning you. The outer god king's large black eye reflected her current expression. She didn't want to make that kind of a face. She didn't want to look at Kim Dokya with that sort of eyes. Unfortunately, her hands were already moving, independent of her will. Alicia. The judge's sword cut down the tentacle reaching out to her. As if they were now irreconcilable enemies, her sword moved uncontrollably. The tentacle burst open noisily, and fable leaked out from it. Dokyo SSI, we're happier now compared to back then, right? If you mean now is better than before, then yes, you're right. It was a fable even she knew well. I think so too. She listened to that story while staggering unsteadily to her feet. The story that only Kim Dokya and Jiang Huiwan remembered managed to grab hold of her mind. After getting rid of her blurred vision, she got to see the surrounding view. She thought that she managed to cut down quite a number of tentacles so far, yet there didn't seem like any noticeable wound on his body. And in the meantime, Kim Dokya's size had ballooned up even more, to an extent that it became hard to believe this used to be a single person. He now resembled a massive wall standing tall all by himself. A wall that would never be filled up no matter what was written on it. And as she stood in front of this wall, Jiang Huiwan despaired. Who cared about the final wall? She couldn't even manage to overcome a wall of just one person. She then spotted Han Soo-young shouting at her in the distance while trying to get here. If it was her, could she be able to cross this wall? It must be nice, being a writer and all. During the Kim Dokya Company's vacation, Jiang Huiwan, lying on the middle of a mountainside, said that to Han Soo-young. What do you mean, nice? No, well, a person who can write well also knows how to speak eloquently too, right? I wish I could be like that too. What, so you can write a love letter to Yi Hyun-seong? No, not that. Jiang Huiwan wordlessly stared in Kim Dokya's direction. Just from that stare alone, Han Soo-young seemed to have figured out what her conversation partner wanted to say. Kim Dokya, struggling so hard in front of his own comrades, the fool that was idiotically trying to carry out a joke-like scenario of workers' day off. Han Soo-young saw him and replied like this. Anyone can write a story. Jiang Huiwan raised her head and looked at this creature that used to be Kim Dokya. She was not a writer like Han Soo-young. On the other hand, she was also not an avid reader like Kim Dokya, so she could neither write like Han Soo-young nor read like Kim Dokya. However, that still didn't mean she couldn't write or read anything. Who cares if you can't write well? Just like you said, you aren't a novelist, right? For sure, this world could be inside of the novel, The Ways of Survival. It could very well be a story written by an author living somewhere and read by someone else. However, this novel was her life. And that was why she too had the right to write this world's next sentence. Jiang Huiwen slowly lowered her sword and asked, "Doc Ya SSI, do you remember that time?" She didn't know if he was listening or not. Despite that, she still placed her hand on the very small nick she created on this massive, expansive wall. The scene she experienced together with Kim Dok-ya leaked out from that nick. There they were, climbing up the heaven stairs while kitted out in formal attire. I was really happy back then, when we went to the department store together to buy new clothes and visited Eden like a bunch of celebs. She liked this world. Everything was being destroyed and all she could see was extensive devastation, yet because this was such a world, she got to find her true worth. You said this, didn't you? That this world is preferable. We're people like that, aren't we? Kim Dok-ya's answer did arrive. Jiang Huiwen widened the wound on the tentacle, as if to say, "Don't forget this wound, please remember her just as he'd remember this wound. That's why you are someone who can only do this right." Jiang Huiwen understood Kim Dok-ya. If she doesn't kill Kim Dok-ya, this world will perish. The eye of the massive outer god king was now looking at her, and it seemed like he was expressing his agreement from the way his head was moving. Jiang Huiwen looked straight into that eye and spoke. "How can I even kill you?" Her vision blurred again, her body shivering. Kim Dok-ya's salvation was cruel. Like rescuing a drowning person with a blade, those saved by him were inflicted an unhealable wound. "Don't make me laugh, this is no salvation." Jiang Huiwen tottered as if she was about to lean against the wall. A world where no one tried to save another. In this world where only victims existed, no, a world where the wounds of the victims were in full display, here was the lone hand full of scars extending out to her. Kim Dok-ya was already extending his hand out from there. It wasn't just the person reaching out, but the one grasping that hand also required courage to do so. Courage to hold that scarred hand, courage not to give up. Even if she knew this wouldn't heal her, even if she knew that holding that hand would only inflict her with a greater wound, courage to hold that hand in order to live for one more time. Some salvations aren't completed by the one giving them out, but by those receiving them. Jiang Huiwen's palm left a deep imprint on the tightly held outer god's skin. She stared at that imprint for a very long time, then slowly raised her head, her hand grasping the sword tightly. And when she did, a certain message resounded out within her ears. Completion of the incarnation. Jiang Huiwen's black square is imminent. Just like holding the hand tightly, she strengthened her grip on the sword. Your black is salvation. Episode 93. Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 2, Fin. Chapter 489. Episode 93. Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 3. The sight of Jiang Huiwen running forward could be seen. She slid among the nameless ones, like the moonlight sliding off the blade. The answer she was searching for was there. Incarnation. Jiang Huiwen's black is salvation. Everyone had their own black. Finally, the moment of choosing their own conclusions had arrived for the Kim Dok-ya Company's companions. Jiang Huiwen. Her judge's sword drew a spectacular trajectory. The companions watched that sword trajectory and hurriedly chased after her. Yi Gil-yong was about to leap into the air along with Yu Sang-a, but had to stop because of a girl was about to be left behind. Shin Yuseong. Shin Yuseong, standing there all alone, was crying. Standing in the exact same location as before, her feet not going anywhere and her gaze fixed on one spot, it was quite clear what she was looking at right now. Fable, Savior of a Star, is continuing on with its storytelling. It was the fable that only Shin Yuseong possessed. A constellation and an incarnation, connected through that radiating starlight. The light emitted by the fable was so beautiful and radiant that Yi Gil-yong unknowingly reached out towards Shin Yuseong. Yi Gil-yong was envious of Shin Yuseong. Just what was it like for one person to understand another? He was too young to truly understand the meaning of the word understand itself. Sometimes he'd feel this sense of deprivation because of that, but on the other hand, he actually liked the fact that his age could be used as an excuse. It's possible for you to not get it yet, but that's okay. You don't need to do this, but I'm sorry that we have to rely on you, Gilyonga. Hey kid, stop showing off and get back. He was relieved. He even thought that it was a fortunate thing. It was fortunate that he got to meet such people in a world like this one. People that he could rely on and act like a child, yet still could remind him with the fact that he was indeed a child. However, Shin Yuseung was here too. There was another child with them who didn't act like one. It was a girl who always looked up at a star. Yi Gil-yong also looked up at the same star, the star he liked. He knew very well the sorrowful light that star emitted and how its color would change when it tried to hide its true intentions or tried to lie. However, he didn't know as well as Shin Yuseung did. How long are you going to stand around dazed like that? Let's go. Shin Yuseung absent-mindedly turned her head towards him. While meeting her gaze, Yi Gil-yong snatched up her hand. Then the two kids began running. Sweat filled the tightly held small hand. I don't understand Dakya Hyung as much as Shin Yuseung. She was the incarnation of the constellation, demon king of salvation. No one could pry them apart or get in between them. You think you're the only one worried about Hyung. You think you're the only one feeling sad. Yi Gil-yong shouted without even looking back and continued to drag Shin Yuseung. He hated the idea of looking younger than her, but for at least today, he wanted to behave like a child. I don't like the Han River, I like oceans better, and I don't like pizza but prefer fried chicken. He too had been saved by that star, that's why. Going to the PC bang, playing phone games and the star he liked so much could be seen in the distance. However, it didn't look like a star now. And also, the star, the subject of jealousy and envy from the constellations that ruled the heavens, was now looked like a scary great demon from the webtoons the boy enjoyed reading so much. The moment that huge head with tentacles wiggling about turned in his direction, Yi Gil-yong's running legs froze still. The king of another world, now grown to a height even taller than a skyscraper. The enemy of the story. The villain who would destroy this world. Did that demon look like Kim Dakya to Shin Yuseung? Yi Gil-yong muttered while trying to fight against his body's trembling, against the fear that that thing might not be Kim Dakya he used to know. Do not get fooled. That creature will destroy this world. He's a being that only cares about himself. To him, your survival holds no meaning at all. Actually, the Kim Dakya he had been looking at was wrong. Hyung, are you a god? What? Or are you the protagonist? The fear that the words spoken by the Dakibus turned out to be correct. I'm not a god, nor am I a protagonist. In fact, I've been always envious of the real protagonist. Yi Gil-yong finally managed to stop the trembling and worked up his courage to look up. The vast outer god's eye was now looking straight at the boy. Kim Dakya's heart couldn't be seen. Not a single thing about that outer god felt like Kim Dakya. The only thing remaining was belief. Gil-yong, there is more than one way to form relationships. Some time ago, he had a chat with Yu Sang-ah regarding his dilemma related to Shin Yuseung. At the time, she answered like this after closing shut the book she was reading. It's similar to how different people interpret the same sentence differently. So, Yi Gil-yong wasn't much of an avid reader, so that comparison didn't resonate with him. Still, I think I understand. He too had his own skill of conversing with the others. It kind of feels different when talking to a praying mantis and a cockroach, you see. The diverse communication was such a skill that allowed him to communicate with species different than his. However, the boy lacked a skill to understand other human beings. What kind of a person was Kim Dakya, he wasn't sure. However, there was this one image that popped into his head first when trying to think of the person called Kim Dakya, the sight of people with their heads or bodies blown up. I'm going to trouble you for a bit. And then the face of Kim Dakya as he placed a grasshopper within the boy's grasp. Fable Insect King has begun its storytelling. Suddenly, the surrounding view shook, and a fable began waking up within the boy. Constellation, ruler of the deepest pit, is grinning insidiously. A swarm of yellow locusts buzzing in from somewhere swirled like a tornado and began enveloping the entire world. On that day, Yi Gil-yong thought to himself that it had been nicer for the whole subway train to be flipped on its head, just like the grasshopper that died in his hands. This incredible feast of status caused the outer gods to scream. Constellations of Starstream began pouring out their messages. Constellations leaning on the absolute evil spectrum are warning the ruler of the deepest pit. Portion of demon kings are greatly astonished by the incarnation's power. The fable flowing vigorously ignored the gazes of the constellations and continued on with its storytelling. This story was something the boy hadn't told any adults yet. And it was a story that Shin Yu-seung, also a possessor of the diverse communication, knew a little bit of. You didn't even have enough money, so why did you go and have a kid? This intense stink of the brown coal, the sight of his father and mother lying on the ground like dead cockroaches, memories of him poking on the cold, unmoving flesh. A funeral without portraits came to an end, and the fatigued eyes of his relatives looking at him. That girl Yomai, I knew she'd do something like this. She was told that that bastard wasn't good for her, yet she. So, who's going to take that boy in? What about the eldest brothers? We can't. There are 3 kids in our place already. Yi Gil-yong didn't know the proper words to describe his life that had been rejected from a very young age. He didn't have any ability to explain or express how big of a wound that was, and that wound continued to fester, unable to be healed or discovered. Look for an organization. There are places that look after kids like him. Yi Gil-yong got dragged by his aunt's hand and climbed on the soul-bound train, and he felt dizzy while looking at the map of Ant Tunnel-like Seoul's subway network. There were so many tunnels here, and he didn't know where he was heading off to. The grasshoppers inside the insect catcher cried like a lost child. This boy really now, throw them away, hurry. They don't live all that long anyway, so disgusting. What would have happened to him if the scenarios didn't start on that day? Dakya Hyung. What if he didn't get to meet these people? Dakya Hyung, I'm over here. Yi Gil-yong cried out loudly enough to tear out his vocal cords. It was fine if his voice couldn't reach its target. It was fine if he wasn't Kim Dakya's incarnation. Gil-yong, if you can't say it, then it's okay to not say anything. However, you must remember this one thing, okay? The boy wanted to say this to him. When you wish to say something, this Hyung will be by your side to listen. That Dakya Hyung wasn't a villain. That he was a just regular person who happened to rescue the boy from other regular people. Kill him, we only have to push a little bit harder. They are failures from a different world line. Do not mind it and push harder. Killing them now will end this. The ranks of the outer gods fighting out in the front were crumbling now. One of the sides seemed to break down completely. Then a group of incarnations led by the myth-grade constellations began advancing towards Kim Dakya. He needed to stop them somehow. Sujajajut. Applicable action is prohibited by the Bureau's probability. The target you wish to protect is the enemy of the story. He needed to convince them that Dakya Hyung wasn't a person like that. But how should he? Kugugagugu. Even as his enemies rushed in, Kim Dakya simply stood there like a wall. He seemed to be saying something every so often, yet those words couldn't be understood. Yi Gil-yong wanted to understand them, though. He hated leaning against the wall, all powerless and helpless. He wanted to stand on Kim Dakya's side. He didn't care if this sort of world was destroyed or not. If Kim Dakya was the enemy of a story, then he'd also become this enemy of the story, too. However, Kim Dakya was too difficult to understand for him. He hated the fact that he was a little kid. If only he was an adult. If only he was Han Soo-young, Yu Young-hyuk, or Jiang Hui-won. If only he was Shin Yu-seung. He felt the sensation of the tightly held hand. Shin Yu-seung was still there. You idiot, wake up. The swarm of locusts flying around settled down. Shin Yu-seung spoke up. I can't understand Ajasi either. Exclusive skill, superlative diverse communication, is activating. I'm just doing my best trying to understand. The skill of these two kids that allowed them to control the Chimera Dragon activated simultaneously. And now, they were in the most optimum state to understand each other. Yigil couldn't read Kim Dakya. However, Shin Yuseung seemed to know how, at least just a little bit. The fable these two read together began rocking the world, and it was as if Kim Dakya's face could be seen ever so faintly now. It seemed like the figure of Kim Dakya they knew was almost within reach. Fable, savior of the star, is having a chat with the Fable Insect King. Hey kids. Han Suyong stood next to them as if to provide protection, and Yi Hyunseong, Jiang Hui-won, and Yu Sang-ah stood nearby to protect them in turn. Adults looking at the world together with the kids were here. Yi Jai-hai's battleship cast a shadow from the air. Both Gong Pil-du and Yi Clhwa could be seen near the cannons of the vessel. Yi Jai-hai then unsheathed her sword, as if to imply that she was ready to fire at any time she wanted to. That prompted the great Dakibai Onsi to ask them, "Are you trying to protect him? Even though you know what kind of existence he is, he's no longer the Kim Dakya that you know. The truth has been exposed to the rest of the world." Don't make me laugh, that ain't the truth. You think truth is that simple. What you've shown is simply edited footage. And that's how you've all been creating scenarios so far, right? Han Suyong spoke to the approaching constellations as if to issue a warning. Don't care whether he's become the enemy of the story or whatever, he's still our comrade. So don't you dare touch him, got that? Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is roaring out. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is exposing her status. Constellation, most ancient liberator, is charging up his lightning. You touch him and we'll kill you all. The moment the constellations protecting Kim Dakya Company made a move, the powerful momentum of the opposing constellations froze still for a moment there. Su-cha-cha-cha-cha. A portion of constellations agree with Incarnation, Han Suyong's words, and Great Dakibai Harong detected the tremor within the probability and promptly cut the messages off. How laughable. You want to protect him, you lot who can't even understand what he's saying. Starstream is warning the Great Dakibus for their interference in the scenario. Frustrated by how the scenario wasn't unfolding in the way they desired, a Great Dakibai enduring the aftermath storm asked them, "Can you not see his current appearance?" Incarnations that got near Kim Dakya shrunk back and began retreating away. It was the same story whether they were incarnations hostile towards him or carrying a favorable impression of him. The outer god, now reaching high up into the heavens. The moment everyone looked into his eye containing the abyss itself, they shuddered and collapsed on their butts. None of you know what he feels, what he desires, and what he thinks about, because you are all measly humans, because you are creatures that can never understand another existence even if you devote your entire lifetime to it. Everyone from Kim Dakya Company looked up at Kim Dakya. What the great Dakibai said was true. They couldn't understand him. The target you wish to protect is the enemy of the story. As if to wake up the characters that had forgotten their roles, the great Dakibai shouted out loudly, "None of you have a choice in this matter. Kill him. If you don't, this scenario will not end." King of the Stories is observing the direction of the final scenario. The oldest storyteller in this world was also watching the unfolding events. Along with her companions, Han Suyong raised her head and looked at the place where the king of the stories was, the being that summarized all the scenarios. She looked at the endlessly stretching final wall. That wall is where their story would be recorded. The scenario won't end. Nice. Is that not what every reader wishes for? Incarnation, Han Suyong has gotten much closer to her black. Han Suyong then looked up at Kim Dakya. When she glared continuously at the giant head of the cephalopod, she thought that it began to resemble Kim Dakya's face just a little bit. The story I'm writing definitely requires that idiot Kim Dakya's presence. Han Soo-young roughly unfurled the bandages like an author ripping up the manuscript she didn't like. Her fable died in the black flame, spread out in the air like pitch-black ink, as if to imply that she could write as long as she wanted to. Starstream is surprised by the incarnation, Han Soo-young's decision. Many constellations are astonished by the incarnation, Han Soo-young's black end. The target you wish to protect is the enemy of the story. Applicable action is prohibited by the Bureau S. Probab. Tsuchachachachu. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, is proud of his incarnation. Han Soo-young smirked. Let's not end the scenario forever. Incarnation Han Soo-young's black is never-ending story. Episode 93, Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 3 Fin. Chapter 490, Episode 93, Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 4. Every Dakibai dreamed of becoming the Great Dakibai. That was the peak of one's tale that a star-streamed Dakibai could reach. Yet those that did reach the top continued to dream. Baehyung stared at the final wall, utterly filling up the view out from the front of the ark. Even though so many stories existed, most of the wall was still empty. Is there a reason to go this far? Baehyung's anger caused the great Dakibus communication line to go silent. He then continued to observe the Kim Dakya Company's companions from the skis of the final scenario, and at the figure of Kim Dakya as the outer god. Starting from the subway that day, all the way up to the final scenario, while Kim Dakya became the demon king of salvation, then became the watcher of light and darkness, Baehyung also became a higher-class Dakibai, before eventually ending up as a great Dakibai himself. The biggest mistake a storyteller can make is excessively interfering in a scenario. Dakibi's mission was to attract as much attention of the constellations and create stories that would be recorded on the final wall. That was why Dakibus should never be dragged around by the scenarios themselves. They must never be seduced by the fables blooming from within the scenarios, and especially should not empathize with the incarnation's pain. But Baehyung made that very blunder. While looking at their fable, several of the feelings he had forgotten in the past woke back up again. That flutter of one's heart when one scenario ended and the next one came around. That sense of fulfillment after seeing the constellations rejoice or wallow from the scenario he had cooked up. Baehyung learned about scenario from Kim Dakya. They are not carrying out the scenario incorrectly. From the beginning, scenario flows in a reversible, malleable way, meaning it flows in the direction that many stars wish to see. Other constellations of star stream are. Looks like you care greatly about this fable since you helped to foster it, but listen well. There is something called the flow of the bigger story. Baehyung was about to raise his voice only to hold himself back. He had to, as every other great Dakibai was now focusing on him. Although vexing, he had no choice as the youngest in this group. Great Dakibai Garing finally broke the silence it had been maintaining until now. A young great Dakibai such as yourself probably finds such conclusions quite fresh. However, I've witnessed fables like that many times before. Do you honestly think that in its immense history there had been no one else who resented Starstream and tried to destroy it? The great Dakibai Garing, one of the oldest Dakibus in existence, and also the closest aide to the Dakibai king, too. There have been countless destructions before. Baehyung simply couldn't unpack the remorse, faintly discernible from that tone of voice. Not all destruction is the same, replied Baehyung. A few great Dakibus glared at him as a warning. However, he tried his best not to shrink back and held Garing's gaze. The latter stared at the former with mysterious, profound eyes and only after a lengthy amount of time opened its mouth. Indeed, the black square they dream of is slightly different from other fables. Perhaps that statement got on its nerves. The great Dakibai Ansi stopped observing and tried to intervene. Garing raised its hand first and stopped its colleague while continuing on with its words. But that difference is the threat itself. Not every fable will become a foundation for the next one. What do you mean by that? There are certain fables that will completely break the scenario. Gaia. the screams from the nameless ones. Once upon a time, they too were beings that participated in different scenarios. They cried out in despair and attacked the constellations. And in their center was the outer god King Kim Dakya leading these godly beings from the other worlds. The enemy of the story. To Bihyung's knowledge, no other calamity was given that title. He hadn't even heard of the plan to give that title in the first place. Garing continued on while watching Kim Dakya's resistance. At the beginning of every scenario, the protagonists will always experience the deviation from the normal world. They will fight against the enemies appearing before them, experience dilemmas and sacrifice something in order to emerge victorious before returning to their original world to receive their deserved rewards. Bihyung knew of that theory. The first thing the lower-ranked Dakibus would hear about was that ancient rule of the scenario. Although outdated, that is still the focal point of the scenario. This cycle has to be protected so that the next scenario can be created and the next world line can open up. Conflicts will be mended, wounds will be healed. The world must remain in one piece as if nothing had happened to it. The distant foot of a mountain range collapsed before exploding spectacularly. The number of constellations gathering was constantly increasing. Bihyung knew the truth. This very final scenario had been planned from the get-go. The end of the world will come, and then it'll be defeated. That imaginary enemy called the Outer God King only existed for that sole purpose. Stars that once used to be at odds with each other would unite against the advent of a powerful enemy and fight together. Some may die and some may survive, but they would still get to resolve all the old conflicts. The world would regain its peace. The gossipers would sing about this history and pass it down through the generations. And nothing will change. Starstream will continue on. And that was the truth of the scenario that the Dakibus pursued. The scenario must cycle back and repeat itself. The absolute majority of constellations are excited by the final scenario. To ensure that no one realized what the star stream actually was and why the scenario had to be repeated, brand new stories had to be supplied to the constellations. However, there were a few that resisted against this. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is continuing with its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch that Swallowed the Myth, is rejecting the predetermined development. Those that resisted against the scenarios predetermined for them, and they wished to bring down the existence of the star stream itself. Incarnation, Han Soo-young's Black is Never-Ending Story. The Never-Ending Story. The contradicting black square that didn't acknowledge the end as an end was glowing brightly over yonder. That was the conclusion an author, not a storyteller of the universe, had decided on. They were existences that rejected the star stream, cycle, and chose to fight on forever. Quiet. As the explosion roared on, the great Dakibai Garing finally made its declaration. Let us close the lid on this world line here. The great Dakibus keeping silent, and those that were observing the responses of their peers until then, all nodded their heads in unison. Even before Bihyung could say something, Baram next to him spoke up first. Bihyung, I'm sorry, but things have come down to this. It seems that you'll have to overlook it this time. The moment Bihyung saw Baram's expression, he realized the truth. Every single great Dakibai gathered here was the universe's best storytellers. They were the rulers that lorded over the scenarios and manipulated the stars while controlling this world line. Even then, for the first time ever, they had grown fearful of the story they had created. We will use up the remaining probability in order to forcibly execute the main scenario. Forcibly executing the scenario was the last trump card up their sleeve that the Dakibus could resort to. It was kind of a deus ex machina that could forcefully restrict the flow of star stream at the cost of the truly nonsensical amount of probability. Especially so when trying to use it during the final scenario. The amount required simply defied one's imaginations. Tsujajajachu. When the Bureau's probability began moving, the skis over the whole of Starstream was blanketed by blinding explosion of sparks. There didn't seem to be any spot left for darkness to hide within this world line. They must end as evil. As if to agree with the will of the great Dakibus, great fables began supporting them. Great Fable, Temple of the Destroyed Myth, is complying with the Bureau's will. Great Fable, Advent of the New Dawn, is agreeing with the flow. Great Fable, Eternal Olympus, respects the Bureau's will. Bihyung watched the final pages being written by the great Dakibus from a step away. Other great Dakibus are strongly urging you to make your decision. He was yet to agree with this conclusion. Bihyung. Even though Baram called out to him, he didn't reply. Starstream is resisting against the great Dakibus interference. The sparks in the skis soon reached the great Dakibus. An incredible storm of aftermaths was rushing in. Even if they were great Dakibus, trying to intervene in a scenario still required this much price to pay. I, great Dakibai Garang, declare my intention to officially participate in the scenario. Garam's declaration prompted other great Dakibus to make theirs as well. I, great Dakibai Naksu, declare my intention to. I, great Dakibai Haram, declare. Over 10 great Dakibus were hardening their resolve. The meaning of officially participating in the scenario meant they were giving up on the positions of neutral bystanders. A short while later, a message could be heard in the empty air. Starstream's probability is experiencing a massive and sudden change. Starstream permits the meta-like intervention. From here onwards, storytellers will no longer be the scenario's bystanders. Many constellations are greatly stunned by the great Dakibus decision. A portion of constellations are denouncing the great Dakibus act of brutality. Bihyung stared at those great Dakibus. He stared at their desire to end this world, even going as far as to ignore the constellations and their messages of opposition. It could be that they had been writing the scenario for far too long. There was another gaze from afar staring at these great Dakibus. Bihyung met this gaze. It was from Kim Dakya, who had become an outer god and then the enemy of the story. After he became an existence outside of the scenario, not even Bihyung could understand him now. Even then, why? Bihyung thought that, in that very moment, Kim Dakya seemed to be smiling. It could very well be that these great Dakibus still didn't understand anything about that guy, still failing to understand what kind of a person Kim Dakya was. Failing to realize what it meant to officially participate in the scenario and to become its characters. Bihyung silently received that gaze and took a step forward. Your black square is calling out to you. And so, it was now Bihyung's turn to choose his black. The intervention from the great Dakibus caused the scenario's balance to tilt the other way. The target you wish to protect is the enemy of the story. Your actions are restricted by the Bureau's probability. Not just Han Soo-yong, but the rest of the companions were being sucked into the storm of the probability's aftermaths as well. Pale blue sparks tightly wrapped around their bodies like binding ropes. Soo-yong SSI this. Those sons of bitches, they are planning to end the scenario in this way. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is quietly seething in anger. Great Fable, Liberator of the Forgotten Ones, has begun its storytelling. The Kim Dakya Company, Great Fables, did absolutely everything in order to resist the Bureau. However, it wasn't enough. Their enemy this time was the strongest Great Fable in this world. Now attack its head. Constellations managed to pry open the gap among the nameless ones and advanced forward, before finally firing their weapons at Kim Dakya. Kim Dakya! Han Soo-yong cried out, but her voice couldn't reach him. You can't protect the target. Target you wish to protect is an existence you don't know. Screw you, don't give me that crap. She recalled what the great Dakibus said as if it was some kind of a curse. A human couldn't understand another even after devoting one's lifetime. However, they weren't just one person. Han Soo-yong looked around her. Yehyonseong Jiang Hui-won Yijai-hai and then Shin Yu-seung and Yi-gil-yong. Finally, her comrades riding on the battleship were looking back at her. Perhaps there was none among them who were Kim Dakya. Everyone here, they held at least one handful of share in Kim Dakya's life. However, there was one person missing from this picture. Where did that guy disappear to? Han Soo-young bit her lip. Unfortunately, she couldn't wait any longer. Alia! Jiang Huiwen screamed as if her body was being torn apart while moving forward. The storm of aftermath was shattering her muscles and blowing up her blood vessels. Still, she forged ahead even as her tattered, bloodied body tottered unsteadily. She took one step at a time towards Kim Dakya while gripping the judge's sword tightly. It wasn't to cut him down, though. Clang! Jiang Huiwen deflected a blade of a constellation, flying in only to vomit out a mouthful of blood. Yi Hyunseong was right behind her. Kodujijudo. The outer god-ified Kim Dakya was fighting against the constellations from within the storm of aftermath, and his comrades were protecting him even as they were left in tatters by the exploding sparks. There are this many people here, yet we can't protect Kim Dakya. Fable, predictive plagiarism, has begun its storytelling. Fable, savior of the star, is searching for the demon king of salvation. Fable, insect king, is searching for the demon king of salvation. Fable, judge of the apocalypse, is searching for the demon king of salvation. Every fable they owned was searching for Kim Dakya. They were crying out towards the man they used to know. Fable, predictive plagiarism, is continuing with its storytelling. If they couldn't fight together because they couldn't understand him, and if that's why they couldn't protect him, then many constellations are sighing in lamentation at the Kim Dakya Company's tragedy. A portion of constellations are lodging a protest at the Bureau's treachery, and blood trickled down Han Soo-young's lips. Dizziness assaulted her overheating head, and her consciousness was wavering. It was also right then that someone grasped her shoulder. She thought that curly blonde locks were dancing past her eyes, only for something to start protecting her and the companions. It felt like a transparent wall was enveloping them. Wall of impossible communication is protecting Kim Dakya Company. Jang Hayoung materialized her wall, and while supporting Han Soo-young, began walking towards Kim Dakya. Is there anyone here who likes the Demon King of Salvation more than me? Sujajajut. Dakya SSI, I'll stop telling you about that story of the lost things. It feels like you're fed up. Hayoung, I'm right here. I have something I want to tell you. Don't worry, I won't go anywhere without you, Ajasi. Sentences were scattering away. Fables that Kim Dakya Company had compiled so far were now intertwining into one theme. A fragment of the final wall has been revealed to the world. Great Dakibus are greatly astonished. Wall of impossible communication is placing its fragment into its place. While being supported by Jang Hayoung, Han Soo-young reached out to the outer god king, Kim Dakya. She felt the sensation of touching a wall, a cold and uncaring wall. Nebula, Kim Dakya Company's first theme, has been publicly unveiled. This wall existed in order to let others know that someone was beyond it, to let them know there was a person requiring a wall in this world, to let them know one could converse with another without hurting each other. Han Soo-young wrote her very first words on that impossible wall. You idiot! She couldn't believe that she wrote something that stupid. However, she didn't have any energy left to write a follow-up. It was then that the wall began shaking. Accompanied by a light knocking noise, a new sentence she didn't write appeared above the wall. Black, 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 Han Soo-young. Episode 93, Omniscient Author's Viewpoint 4, Fin.